All right, welcome to episode 10 of the War Room. I got Travis Nevills here with us, and he is a, a driver that's going to be running the King class. And Travis has kind of got a story for us that I want to talk about. He got out of Derby, and I'll let him go into that. But now he's coming back, and he's coming back to run the King class. So let's get into that. Thanks for joining us, Travis.
Thanks for having me, man.
So tell me a little bit about this. You're kind of your past in Derby, and you got out and you're coming back, and maybe what you were missing or whatnot.
So yeah, a little about me. I started off running trucks locally. I thought it was cool. Started running trucks. Got into running cars, like the mod cars, kicker cars. Things started getting carried away. Promoters started getting desperate for cars, and they weren't teching like they should have. And kicker cars turned into 5-foot cars, and it just the fun kind of got taken out of it. And I got to a point where I didn't feel like there was anywhere to go or anything worth running or building for. So yeah, I mean, a group of us cumulatively actually got out and started selling out, and I at the time thought it was fortunate for me, but unfortunately pretty much sold everything I had Derby related, blew my engine up, and sold my cradle and trans braces, rear ends, and pretty much sold out of everything, and was actually working on cleaning out my shop and getting rid of other people that built with me Derby in. And my buddy Adam Williams came to me and was like, "Hey man, I'm going to build a fresh car." I'm like, "You want to build a fresh car?" And I was actually in the process of getting ready to sell his stuff. I had his rear end listed and had talked to a few people about possibly buying it. And, he had someone lined up to buy his mod car. And so we were getting rid of everything. And then he came to me and says, "Hey, I'm going to build a fresh car." I'm like, "Yeah, for where?" It had been 3 years since he had derbied, and all his stuff sat at the shop dormant. And he brought up the King. And I was like, "Yeah, I've heard of it, man." But yeah, I didn't have all the details. I thought maybe you had to qualify for it. We talked back and forth. He's like, "No, man, it's open to everybody, and they're going to pay out $50K in 23. I'm like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, $50,000 for first place. They got this format." So I started digging into it. First thing I did before I read any rules or talked to you or really anybody about it was I went to YouTube and watched, I think it was 13 heats from 22. I watched all the heats and then watched the feature and then rewatched them all. Talked to Adam and I said, "Hey man, I'm in. This is what we've been looking for. You convinced me, and I got a long road ahead of rebuilding, getting everything back. But I've had conversation with you. It just seemed like what the Derby world was missing, in my opinion."
Well, let's talk a little bit about those conversations and maybe what you saw in those heats, because we're doing something different here. And yeah, you've had a conversation with me, but not everybody out there maybe necessarily gets to have a conversation with me and gets to hear my full spiel on why we're doing what we're doing. And that's part of the reason why we're doing these podcasts, right? Is we want to get out to more people because, through text message or through a post or something like that, you can be perceived a certain way or "Oh, I don't like that because of this guy doesn't like that," or whatever. Let's talk about that conversation maybe and what appealed to you in those videos first.
The first thing that caught my eye in watching all the heats was really the competition aspect of it, right? The politics, although we can never completely remove them, they're always in everything we do in life. There's going to be politics in one aspect or another. But having 3 guys on the track or 3 competitors on the track that only one advances and the other 2 go home really rids the politics in that heat. I mean, what's the advantage of working with this guy when you're just going to have to battle them as soon as the next guy's out? So there's, in my eyes, there's not much advantage to that. I know me personally, if I'm there and I draw Adam, and Adam's in my heat, he knows as well as I know that I'm probably more inclined to work with the other guy in there to take Adam out, because I think I got a better chance of beating the other guy possibly, you know? And when it comes to running for that kind of money and that kind of title, those friendships go away, you know? There's, what's the advantage of it? So that was huge to me, to see that you got these three people on the track, only one's making it to the big dance. And everybody just went out there and they let it all hang out. You know, they gave it everything they had, with the idea in mind of, it's all left right here. I have to leave it here.
You know, I hear what you're saying. A lot of people talk to me about like the 2-on-1 stuff, and I'm like, does it really benefit you to work with somebody else? Like, the shot that you, on the caliber of drivers that are on the track and the skill that's on that track, are you really going to pass up that tire shot that someone left open, knowing that that could be your shot at 50K? You know, because if you get down to battle on that dude 1-on-1, you might get beat, you know, but if you catch him slipping, you know, that might be your shot to take him out. And that's my argument to people. It says, oh, it's still 2-on-1. It's like, yeah, but what's a normal derby, man? It's 3, 4, 5, 6, 8-on-1, sometimes 8-on-2. Like, you really like those odds?
I've been heard saying by several people, I don't mind the odds in 2-on-1. You know, 2-on-1 isn't bad in my opinion, if that's the way it shook out. I mean, hell, the last big derby that I ran, I think it was 8-on-1, and that's tough. It's really hard to outdrive that. But 2-on-1, I don't think those odds are bad. And I didn't see through the heats, I didn't see where there was much of 2-on-1, because like you said, anybody on that track should have in their mind, I'm going to the big dance. I want to win the big prize. So even if your buddy's next to you and you guys are kind of working together and he leaves that front wheel hanging out there, you're going to take that shot, because, you know, even if you take out the other guy, you two got a battle and only one of you is making it out. So absolutely. I think all of that plays into the level of competition that's being sorted out in this show.
Well, and that's new to the derby world, and there is a lot of people, you know, when you introduce something new, that, you know, hate on it, and for various reasons, right? But the competition aspect of this is unlike anything that we see in derby, and a lot of people talk about this being a sport or not being a sport. They're right, I think, when they say it's not a sport. But that's what we're trying to create, because a sport must crown a champion, right? There must be competition. And even the drivers, I've noticed that you've got to get the drivers to think differently. They've got to understand that, like you said, this is about you and what you can accomplish. I mean, heck, right before this, I was tuning into the NFL playoffs, and everybody just talked about, man, it's all about winning a championship. It's all about winning a championship. In the derby world, it's kind of a weird thought, but I don't hear people say that. Like, I hear people, you know, I don't really want to deal with the drama. You know, I'm just here, you know, with my team, and they work together as a team. Where are the guys that want to win championships? You know, where are the guys that want to perform on the biggest stage? I think we've talked about this a lot, man. This stage isn't really for everyone, because some people just don't really want to compete, right? And I mean, it's something we've talked about extensively.
Absolutely. It's a big dynamic in how people want to compete and what people view as competition. You know, there's other shows all across the country, team shows, county fairs. We know it's real clicky. You got an East Coast clique, you got the West Coast clique, you got the Midwestern guys, you got the Northern guys. And all of them kind of have their own opinion on what the crown jewel is, if you will. But a lot of it, I fail to see the same way they do. which everybody finds their own glory in things. But when it comes down to actually determining who is the best, or who drove the best, in order to figure that out, I think you actually have to be pitted against other like-minded people that are looking for the same competition, right? You know, I've made a video before with some text to it that I said in there, you get in where you fit in. And it seems to me like this isn't where everybody fits in. There's a lot of drivers that it seems like aren't interested in fitting into this top level of competition. They'd rather fit in a team show or a heat where there's 50 cars out there and you can spend the first hour just rubbing paint. And it becomes more of a competition of who can outlast, not who can win, not who can be offensive and take the victory, but who has the best defense or the most friends on the track. That's the feeling I get. I mean, I'll be honest with you, when we made the decision to run the King, talked to a couple local guys. We got a local guy that's been derbying for years, but he's never ran a big show. He's talking about getting out of it, but he wants to run a big show. So he says, man, I'm going to run. And when we knew that it was going live, the registrations, we all met up at my shop. I mean, we were all there. We had it up. We're refreshing. You know, you'd have thought that there was a new pair of Jordans releasing or something. Because we were convinced that, man, we got to get a spot and this is going to sell out fast. So we did. And I mean, I was so excited. Adam and Mitch were excited. I mean, I'm screenshotting that I got a spot and I'm sending it to people. And that's why I think it was a week later or something, I reached out to you and I was like, so man, is it full or what? Like I thought it'd fill up in 15 minutes. So to find out, to hear from you that it wasn't full, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's still not full today. I'm shocked.
Well, I didn't know what to expect. It's not full today. I tell people it's over 50 under 100, because the reason being is because there's people out there building cars right now or telling me that they're running and they haven't paid an entry fee. And as you know, the 50K is based on 100 cars, and we'll pay the percentage of entries. If there's 75%, of entries that we get, then we'll pay 75% of, the 50 grand, and that'll be first and that'll go all the way down. Look, the reason being is because like we're in a weird spot in the derby world. There's so much competition with promoters and stuff out there. If the drivers come, we'll pay. And if they sign up, they don't. I mean, we're just basing this strictly off signups. There was one piece there I wanted to talk about, and it goes hand in hand with this, is the education part of it and the different driving styles, and why this isn't appealing to more people. And I think it's a lot to do with education. It's a lot to do with these types of conversations. You've got a couple different demographics of people in the derby world. You've got the old school, the big names, you want to say, right? And then you've got some loners out there, but then you got some up and coming guys, and the up and coming guys traditionally, they had to get in the know or get in that in crowd in order to compete. So they're iffy. Hey, I don't know if I can compete against the big name guys, but a lot of the big name guys aren't signing up, and why is that, right? We've talked about, like, okay, why are big name guys not signing up? And it's because this changes the game. And everyone talks about competition and leveling the playing field and this and that. Well, this is like in front of everybody. You're putting your reputation on the line. But man, some of these reputations have been built on cherry picking shows and building hard cars and running against soft competition and going, and it's just like, you can't build a sport around that. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, absolutely. Speaking to the names and people that sign up and don't sign up, I've got a local kid, Tyler, that I've been nagging at. Hey man, sign up. Hey man, sign up. And he actually bought a mod car that I had built, and he was doing some work to it, wanted to run it locally, but I mean, he's got all the equipment. He's got ski protector. He's got all the, narrow trans brace and bell and everything. He's set up. He's good. So he's got all the equipment. He's got the knowledge for the most part. Myself and Adam offered to help him. Hey man, come build in the shop. We'll teach you what you need to know. We'll help you build a competitive car. We'll get you on the track. And he's still nervous, he's young, 22 years old, hasn't ran anything other than like a county fair. And he was nervous about the level of competition, and not to take anything away from anyone because I'm a nobody. I mean, I would say most of the people in the Derby world don't know who I am. I said, watch the videos, go watch the heats, watch the feature. There's a bunch of names in there whom I don't know who they are. I've never heard of them, but they built a hell of a car. They drove their ass off. They made the feature. They went out there and they did what I'm sure a lot of people didn't think they could do, including themselves. I'm sure there was a lot of people nervous going, oh man, what if I draw, one of the big names? What if I draw the Allens, or I draw one of the Brauns, or if I get Pete Hanson, what do I do? And people went out there and they did it. There's a saying that I've been told my entire life is there's never going to be reward without risk. So if you're not willing to risk something, don't expect a reward. And I think this is a wonderful platform to display that in. And the risk on our part, honestly, is minimal compared to what the show is risking. You put all this together and you don't get the entries. That doesn't just hurt us; that hurts you guys too.
Yeah, I wonder, sorry to cut you off there, but I wonder when that's going to change. Like, I wonder when drivers are going to see that all we are doing is trying to build the biggest stage for you guys to make your name, for us to promote you guys. I wonder when it's going to change. Like, hey, my success, at the show is your success too, because the bigger stage, the more money. Like, when is that going to change? I don't understand. I mean, I can't talk to every driver out there, but geez, man, I mean, there's just so much like resentment or well, I hope that show fails, or he ain't going to get 100 entries, or why is that? When is it going to change?
I wish I had the answer to that. I think a popular word during this podcast will be education, because for some reason people are so uneducated in this area, and they look at, here's Triple D and they're trying to put this show on and they're going to pay this much and how much is he making, and they try to turn it around to you. But if you look at the big picture, you see people running county fairs for $500 payouts, right? You want to talk about getting robbed, man. You go out there, and I don't care if you're in a bone stock car that you paid $500 for. You go out there and you put on a hell of a show, and you bring in a couple $100,000 worth of revenue for the fair to run for $500, and you don't hear anybody complaining about that. They're still doing it, right? Everybody's still running their county fairs. They're still packing the grandstands there. But when it comes to building the stage and giving us somewhere to perform and turn our hobby into an actual organized sport and making it so much bigger than what it is. I mean, the potential's there. Everything's there. A lot of the groundwork has been done. We as drivers just need to get together and push it forward. Everybody needs to envision the same thing and take advantage of what's been there and what's coming for us. That's what caught me about this show when I saw the $50,000 to win, and best case scenario, all I got to do is beat 4 cars for the chance to run for that 50. That's a hell of an opportunity. I go to a county fair and I got to beat 15 cars to maybe get $500. I'm not a big fan of those odds.
Absolutely. But going back to the show, like thinking about like us working together, you guys have started to do a really good job of promoting the show that you're going to run. Why are drivers not doing that? Right. it's detrimental to the sport. And we've talked about this. It's almost as if we're starting over, because there's never been a base. There's never been, like, if you want to talk about like the NFL, think of like the 70s or 80s, right? And those teams and those players, they don't make the same money as the players today, but they were building the platform for people to build on. They were giving back to the sport. So many times, the so-called big names, they're not on social media. Okay. They don't tell you where they're running. They don't update you on the build. They don't promote the show that they're running. What is the disconnect there? Like, we're in this together. How can I be a fan? Like Travis, how can I be a fan of you if the last thing I knew of you, you were retiring, and if you don't put anything out there, you just show up at the King, how can I be a fan? I didn't know what you were doing. You've never kept me updated. There's been so much disconnect between like a driver and the promotion of an event. It's crazy, because some people, they'll say, well, I don't want to promote the event because I don't want Dustin to have success. Look, if Dustin has success, the Derby world has success, because the only reason why I'm doing this is to organize the sport in which will elevate everybody. This isn't about Dustin. This isn't about Triple D. This is about creating an actual sport, man. And we got to have those things.
Absolutely. I agree. There's a huge disconnect. I see it. I realize it. I struggle to understand it, because if I look, when I'm running somewhere, man, I tell all my buddies, I tell my family, I put a post on Facebook, because I want to see all the people I know there. I hope they come out to support me, and I want to give them something to support. So the bigger names of people that, the Don Santals and the Bob Whitakers and, all of these icons of our sport, that if you don't personally know them, you don't know where they're going next, unless there's a driver's list that was put out, which that's a whole nother can of beans, I guess you could say. How many people get upset that someone put out a driver's list? But that's the stuff that we need to drive this sport. Look at NASCAR has a schedule that comes out every year. Sprint cars have a schedule that come out every year. Any organized sport has a schedule, and that's what the fans, the players, and everybody look forward to. Like, the Bears are playing the Packers this day. Everybody puts in their vacation to go watch this big rival game. Whatever. We need that kind of organization to get to a level of similar sorts, which I think is possible. And to touch on what you're saying, as far as, people not putting that out there and not updating it, I think it's a matter of, this is just a hobby that started for them so long ago, and they just do it because that's what they know. And maybe they are not interested in seeing it turn into something more. And that's where I think we bring education in, and we get the younger people educated, and we get them to buy in, and we create what we need going forward. That's to touch back on Tyler. I told my buddy, hey man, the best thing you can do is to send off your registration, commit. We'll get you a car together to run the King, and go get the knowledge, go get the track time. You're not going to learn anything running your county fair against your 5 buddies. You're just at a plateau, and you're doing the same thing over and over. If you want the knowledge and you want the experience, you just got to get out there and do it. So what better place to do it than this? Go out there, give it a shot. Maybe you win. Hopefully, you, at the minimum, you make the feature. You get a grand back just for making the feature. That's awesome. And he bought into it. He's like, you know what? You're right. I do want to be better. I want to grow in this sport. I want to be a big name. And to do that, I need practice. I need experience. And I'm not going to get that running my local show. So, yeah, here we go. Let's do this.
Yeah, you're not going to get exposure, right? There's so many things to touch on there. When you talk about when you talked about running on this stage and being a young guy, like, and people getting a demographic to buy in. I think that we've kind of realized that not everybody's going to do that, because some people don't want to see it go any further than what it is, and for whatever reason, which is totally fine. But we're going to need that as a sport. Like, we're going to need people to put it on the line. We're going to need some of these guys running our event to, some of these guys are going to lose, but you're going to make names of other people, right? And we're going to start to build that platform in which we're giving back. I mean, Jason Kidman is a guy that I talk to quite frequently. He's jumped on the TikTok stuff, and other people have jumped on it too. But even with him, like, Kidman's the one that started all that, because he was in that meeting that we had with the Jegs guys, and they were like, "Hey, look, this is where you need to go." Kidman started all that, and then you still got people jealous of him, and what he's doing, just because, like, "Hey, what have you done on the track?" It's like, well, he's done a lot for the sport. Like, what are you doing for let's talk about what he's done for the sport. He's grown the sport to millions of eyeballs on TikTok. Maybe his tracks, I mean, he won Blizzard Bash, but maybe the track success is going to come in the future, as he grows his audience. We've got to look at it in terms of that, and every show, every build, if we got to get the people that are doing it to give back to the sport. I mean, think about this, man. The playoffs are going on right now, the NFL playoffs. Okay. Every game, every event, every season, it's always bettering the sport. The sport is going to pay more next year. It's going to get to more eyeballs. You always protect the shield. I ask you, these events that are happening now, what has changed in Derby in the past 20 years? Honestly, like, what's changed?
I mean, not much, honestly. I it's kind of been the same thing over, really, until I don't even know exactly where to put it. I'm starting to see a change now. Maybe it's just my eyes are fresh, but I'm starting to see more people interested and more people asking questions. And heck, I was at a local Harbor Freight the other day, and I heard one kid say, "Yeah, they're kind of heavy, but I'm just going to groove them out and use them for demolition derby tires." And these kids were like 15, 16 years old, and, naturally caught my attention and sparked a conversation. But as far as innovation goes and something new, I mean, we've had some new parts come out here, some, new steering shafts and, different technology in rear ends and engine cradles, stuff like that. But as far as what promoters or what shows have changed or the provision there, it's been kind of stagnant, really up until this caught my attention, until Adam introduced me to the King, and I started looking at it and looking at not just what you guys had to offer from the format, but your rule set, which, I mean, not many promoters put out a rule set that has 3 or 4 different variations depending on, do you have the equipment to have full engine cradles, or are you not going to run an engine cradle and you can do this? Different rules for 03s, different rules for leaf sprung cars. You could run imps. Like, that's super cool. I remember growing up watching derbies when I was young, just hearing everybody go, "Yeah, Imperials are outlawed." I didn't even know what an Imperial was. So I think that's cool to see the imps out there. What you guys have done for just the media, the different, shorts or reels or TikToks, whatever you want to call them, that I see, the filming of all the heats and the feature, and you guys are constantly pushing, this driver and Kinman and, Pete Hanson, whatever. You highlight everybody. It seems like you're doing your part to help push them. And I think it's our turn to do our part to help push you. I mean, it has to be a team. We have to work together. Yeah. And that's in any sport, really, whether it's, UFC or football or basketball or NASCAR, or, if you lose all the drivers in NASCAR, the name's worth nothing anymore, right? And if the drivers in NASCAR lose the support of NASCAR, what happens now? We have to be a team, and we have to realize that we're working together for the greater good, not against each other. And it, like I said, what you guys are doing, or you doing Triple D, however you want to word it, is a great thing. I think the hype that you guys bring. I mean, obviously the $50,000 payout. I mean, that's huge. That really grabs people's attention. The fact that we're not limited. I mean, we can run old iron, we can run new iron, we can run an imp, and the rules are fair to all of us, no matter what car you pick, whether it's a new school Ford, a metric GM, a old iron GM, whatever. I mean, it's a hell of an opportunity that I really don't see anywhere else. All the other shows are, you got 80s and newer, and then when you're 80s and newer, there's only a few 80s and newer cars worth running per the rules, and that's kind of what drove me away is all the politics. And if you're going to go run Metal Mayhem and you can't get an 80s gusset Ford, then you might as well stay home, or whatever the situation was. That doesn't exist here, and I think that's something worth supporting.
Well, I encourage people to look into our event a little bit more and educate themselves on that, because our rule set, there's not anywhere in the country. Our top 5 last year was a 70s GM sedan, a 98 to 02 Ford, a GM wagon, another GM sedan, and then an 03. That variation there in the top 5 is unheard of. I mean, you can't get that anywhere in the country. And I'm like, man, why aren't people seeing that? Why aren't people realizing that? Because they're like, oh, wagons are so expensive, or this or that. I'm like, no, the format has changed the game. The wagon was so popular, and everybody wanted a wagon for so long, because the game back then was a game of longevity. Now it's about beating your competition. So how do you beat them? Well, you beat the tires off of them. And it doesn't matter that the ass end of a wagon can take a beating for 3 hours, because our heats or our feature don't last 3 hours. So it doesn't matter. You get the tires beat off that thing in 2 seconds. It's funny. I listen to people, say those things. It's like, dude, this game's changed. I mean, this is an offensive game. This is a killer be killed game. A wagon, people are building them different. People are driving them different, to get that advantage.
Absolutely. The builds are evolving, and it is. I personally feel it's a heavily offensive game. When it's you and there's 2 other people on the track, you don't have time to really be on the defense. I mean, yeah, your head's always on a swivel. You're trying to avoid wheel shots and stuff, but there's nowhere to hide. There's no one to rub paint with. It's you and 2 other people, and only one's coming out. And I think that the rule set and what we're allowed to do in the rules, like you said, whether you're running a metric wagon or an old iron wagon or a sedan or an 03 and newer, a 98 to 02, maybe you're running a Chrysler Shocker, maybe you got an imp. The rules allow for you to build a very competitive car that can be driven offensively. Wagons were very popular. Like you said, the ass end of a wagon could just take a beating for hours if you built it right. And it seems like a lot of people now are starting to change the way they build the wagon, so it's not so offensive or so defensively. It's more offensively. They're not building them to just be tough and everything glued right there to the frame rails and just be able to take a hit after hit after hit after hit. They're building them to where they kind of move a little bit, and you can use them offensively instead of just as defense.
Yeah, that's been really neat to see. I mean, but I think that to the person that necessarily doesn't follow us all the time, and maybe they just listen to this podcast, you got to educate them, educate people on it. Hey, the game's changed. I mean, no longer are you pulling on the track and just be like, I'm going to work this corner all night long. You ain't working any corner, when it's just 3 on the track, you're going to be working wheels and every shot that you can get. I mean, it's just a totally different game. And people are, when people think demolition derby, man, if they're not the diehard person like us, they think, oh, big shots. They think mad dogs. And now they think reapers. I seriously, like, I asked, like, and I don't mean this in a degrading way, but like, what skill does it take to be a mad dog or a reaper? Honestly.
I think there is some notable mad dogs. The Reaper thing, I'm not super familiar with. I know that's like a East Coast type thing. That stuff started coming out as I was on my way out. So I think in a mad dog, there is some skill that can be involved, but there's also some of it that's hyped up. I'm someone that I like to think, every time I'm on the track, I'm there to drive as hard and as smart as I can, you know. So it's weird to me that we do have these, the Mad Dog Awards, and there's all the talk that go around. I'd rather have a Mad Dog than a first place any day, and all that stuff. And it started to shine. I don't remember what show it was. At one time, I remember there was like a $5,000 purse for Mad Dog, and that was like maybe $1,000 less than what first place took, but that was for the overall Mad Dog. And I just think that's what our show should be. Like granted, it doesn't, the one hit wonder thing, I think needs to be gone away from it. It takes no skill to back up to the wall, hold it to the wood, and hit whatever's in front of you and junk their car and your car at the same time. That's not accomplishing anything. But to have a driver that is out there taking calculated shots and hitting hard and knowing where they can hit hard and avoiding getting their wheels ripped off. And I mean, that's what Demolition Derby is about. And I think that's what needs to be promoted,
Yeah. So I said that, right? Because it's a little bit controversial because, people be like, oh, I'm a mad dog, whatever. Like, well, yeah, but I want to talk about why they're highlighting mad dogs. They're highlighting mad dogs is because there's recognition that our sport is there for entertainment, right? And people didn't necessarily know how to get entertainment. So the easiest way to entertain people was to highlight these one-shot wonders, right? Well, it turns out that, the Derby can't really sustain that type of one-hit wonder throughout the Derby. You got to have a winner at the end of the night. And those two things always conflicted, right? There was a carrot, whether it's our case, it's $50,000 carrot at the end of the Derby. And that's why you couldn't pay big money like this and run a normal Derby, because it would be, people would be changing, they'd have a pit stop for fuel. It would be terrible. 3.5 hours in, everybody time out. We gotta change tires and have a pit stop for fuel. And like, we got to get people to see the bigger picture. That's why you could never pay big money, because what our sport was highlighting was the wrong thing. And it was rewarding the wrong thing, that big carrot at the end. Well, you can still have the big carrot at the end, but then encourage the competition. And this is going down another road. What promoters did in the past is promoters broke sticks. Dude, you can't break sticks. You can't do it. And then, people are like, well, you have to break sticks. Well, I can't, because Travis, you're going to have $50,000 in a car to come support me. And basically me coming out and telling you that that's the end of your night because I put this reward here and that's what you were trying to obtain. But I said, well, you pushed it a little too far. I'm going to make a subjective decision to make an example out of you. You're never coming back. You're never going to support me again. So you can't do that. So again, that's why the format exists, because now we make you compete. We put it all in your hands. Get rid of the subjective decisions, you know, um, get rid of that. Put it back into your hands.
Right, which makes sense. I've seen it. We saw it this year at Blizzard Bash, right? We saw there was several people, scraping paint, weren't driving as hard as some people thought they should have been. And we saw Tim come out and break one of the sticks on the RDP cars, and goodness gracious, all hell broke loose, man. There was booing, there was people throwing stuff, there was screaming. I mean, I saw one of the officials peel his shirt off and throw it on the track when that happened, said he was done. Because nobody knows how he made that call. I mean, there was plenty of people out there doing the exact same thing that I'm not sure which RDP driver it was. I don't know if it was Dylan Braun or who it was, but I mean, it caused a huge upset. And me as a spectator there, somebody that, pretty knowledgeable about the sport, I was dumbfounded. I could not believe that he came out there and broke that guy's stick. It blew my mind. I didn't understand it. And especially, earlier in the day, there was an issue with that team where one of their cars was a second late getting to the impound barn or whatever. So they came out into this show. It was on the qualifying side, I believe. They came out into the A main, the qualifying main, down a car, when they had, this guy was perfectly good. He just was a minute late, whatever. So it seemed like the odds were already stacked against them. And then they hit the track. They're doing what they have to do, driving intelligently, knowing that they're down a car and everybody else has got at least 3 or 4, and then their stick gets broke. And it's like, how do you make that call? Man, if I was on the track, my stick got broke. Oh, that's a tough situation. And like you said, you've removed that. First of all, you got it's 3 people on the track, 1 versus 1 versus 1. There's really no opportunity. I mean, if you're sleeping, you're out. If you want to go hide behind somebody, you're still a target. There's not a corner to hide in. You got to do what you got to do. And when you make it to the feature, if I'm correct, I think it's 17 cars that'll be on the track.
I think it's going to be max 14, 15 cars on the track.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've been reading the rules too much, not paying enough attention to the format, I guess. But so even say that 15 cars, 14 cars, where are you going to hide in that? Where, I'm sure there's going to be some politics. There'll be a couple buddies that are, they want to work down to the end or whatever, but there's not room to hide. And I don't foresee a situation where an official is going to have to stop the race and come out and break someone's stick because they're not being aggressive enough, or they're not making contact enough or whatever. Because I mean, if I'm on the track and I see somebody that's trying to avoid that, that's my target. If you're trying to avoid the hit, I'm going to bring it to you, because that's my thought process of, is he thinks he's going to do his own thing and hide. Well, I'm going to bring it to you, and that throws you off your game, right? Now you're all frazzled and razzled, and you either stay on the defense and give me a wheel shot, or you get razzled and pissed off, and you hopefully come take a shitty shot on my ass end and rip your steering off or something. But if there was 40 or 50 cars on the track, it's really easy to blend in, right?
Well, think about it on that level, right? A lot of promoters are like, you can't pay 25 grand. You can't pay 50 grand. You're never going to have a show. I mean, when we post this stuff, it's like, oh, 3-hour feature. They're going to be running out of gas, this and that. I mean, you've seen it. You've responded to some of those comments. No, you limit the feature. Not everybody gets a ticket to the big dance. You don't do that. And we're limiting, like, there's going to be 14, 15 cars that make the feature. And that's if 100 cars show up, and that's 14 or 15. You all don't make the feature. Everyone doesn't. This isn't in society, derby guys are probably number one at pounding this drum is not everyone should get trophies. Well, yeah, not everyone should get trophies, and we believe that. We're making that happen, and why aren't people, seeing that? And it just comes down to education. and that's part of the reason why we're having this podcast. We want to educate people on what we're doing, but you're right. Not everybody gets a trophy. Not everybody gets to make it. Um, we had a 40 something minute feature last year for 25K, and it'll be the same this year because Travis, you're out on the track and you got Pete Hanson, you got Trace Braun out there or whatever, and they leave a shot open, you can take it because there isn't punishment down the line. You don't have to outlast them for another 3 hours. You take it now because, dude, you could easily win this derby in the first half hour, by breaking some steering.
And I think the opportunity of that, you mentioned two rather big names in the sport, right? They ran last year. You got Pete Hanson, you got Trace Braun. I mean, everybody knows their names. I know Pete, I know Trace. I'd like to say we're friends. I don't know what their story is, but I think, in my opinion, if we're on that track and we're doing that dance and Pete does leave his wheel hanging out there and I take that shot, I think I'm going to get a thumbs up from Pete, right? It might first be a middle finger up, but at the end of it, it's going to be a thumbs up. If I took Pete out, Pete's going to come give me a hug. He's going to tell me good race. He's going to shake my hand. There's sportsmanship to it from what I've seen, especially with those names that you mentioned. They've been doing it long enough. And I think that's one thing. I didn't really see anybody that came out of the 22 King show that was pissed off and didn't feel like they got a fair shake. It all seems pretty straightforward, and that's what entices me. There's promoters for some reason had gotten the mindset or the thought of the more cars we have in the feature, the better. That's what it seemed like. I mean, there was even an issue this year back at Blizzard Bash where there was a debate of whether it was XD Derby products that won, which was the former Johnson Wrecking Crew, or whoever it was they were up against. There was a supposed debate about that. So they just said, okay, we're going to take both teams. Well, what the hell kind of competition is that? I thought personally XD Derby products won it. I mean, Tubby was out there, drove his ass off, couldn't see anything, barely had a front end left on his car, did what he had to do. And the whole crowd, I thought, said, oh man, Tubby won that. He carried XD Derby products through that. And then come to find out later that they didn't call it an official win and they decided to take the second place team too. Like, what's the point of competing at that point? If I literally just won and then you came to me and told me the person you beat, we're not really sure that you beat them, so we're going to let them go too. That's frustrating. To say the least, it's frustrating, but it seems that a lot of these promoters have come to the terms that, well, it'd be better to have an extra 4 cars, or, hey man, there was 2 teams that were supposed to show up and they didn't show up, so we're going to allow a couple extra people to go. We're going to change the way we do things because we want to make sure that we got a 40 car feature because it looks good on TV when 40 cars pull on the track and we have that whole thing full. That don't make no sense to me.
No, and it takes drivers like you were just saying, the respect with drivers. It takes drivers that, hats off to you, Travis, with Pete, speaking as Pete, you got me today. I made a mistake and you made me pay. It takes those drivers to acknowledge that, and move forward and say, hey, shake your hand at the end of the day. Congrats. Rather than, the drivers that are just leave, right? We want drivers to stay Sunday because they missed out on the main event, but they want to see what that main event's about because they want to get back there next year. I think a lot of promoters, if we get more cars in the feature, more people will stay for Monday or for Sunday, in the main event. I'm sure it comes down to a money thing because, dude, there isn't a lot of people making money out there in the promoting world because it's just so competitive right now. So I'm sure they're making those decisions because of that, but we're just not going to do it. Like, we want you to stay because I want you to see the lineup. I want you to see how we're, the build up to the feature. I want you to see the victory lane celebration. We've actually got a victory lane. Trace mentioned to me that was one of the coolest things that he's ever done is we didn't let, yeah, he celebrated a little bit on the track, but we take you to victory lane. Like, you're going to have to put, we're going to drag your car, or you're going to drive your car to victory lane, and you're going to celebrate. I mean, this is a win, and that's where you celebrate, and that's where you get the pictures. So just, yeah, I mean, you can elaborate a little bit more on that, but.
Well, can I, if I don't win, or when I don't win, can I just rent victory lane to get a couple pictures?
It'll be up all weekend. You can, we want that to be a thing, that's something different. We're going to have victory lane there all weekend. Kids can take some pictures in, and drivers can take pictures in, and that's what it should be about. It should be about attaining that moment, and nobody can take that moment away from you. Because as you've seen, we're going to do a really good job to make sure nobody ever forgets who won our show in the past. I can tell you that.
Oh yeah, I think you guys do a great job of that. And I think, something you said about wanting a driver to stay Sunday to watch the feature, the main, the big dance, or whatever you want to call it, even if they're out. I think that's important. You have to support what's supporting you. And one of the big things is we're a community, right? I mean, it's no lie. We hear about it all the time. We do lots of fundraisers and whatever we can.
But are we a community? I think I know where you're going with this. That's to that. I want to throw that in there. Are we a community, really?
In an aspect, I think some people buy into it. Do we have everybody? Not necessarily. I think if we did that, a lot of what you and I talk about would be a non-starter. There wouldn't be anything to talk about because we would all be working together. I guess maybe I'm talking from a personal point of view. If I come out and I lose my heat on Friday and I lose my heat on Saturday, I might put my car on the trailer, but I'm not packing my tools up or anything. I'm not heading out. And not just because, I got a couple local guys going, but most people that know me, I mean, if I know someone that's going to the big dance on Sunday and, they took a rough shot and swayed their frame and they need help or whatever. I mean, anybody that knows me knows I'm staying to help. I'll help you. What you need? A welder, you need a torch, you need tools, you need me to swing a hammer. Because I want to see the best feature that there could be. And if that means, if Pete took a nasty shot, his car's not going to get back together because he doesn't have the help to get it together, even though he advanced to the feature, I'm going to be there to help him. And I think Pete would be there, or Trace, or Adam, or Jason Kinman, or anybody, I think that camaraderie is there with the caliber of drivers I've seen at the show last year. And I think that's where we focus, is if there's other people that don't want to join in this, or they think, them guys are wasting their time, or they're stupid, or that doesn't make any sense. Instead of focusing on how do we grab their attention, I think we focus forward on how do we build something bigger and how do we build something better with people that are willing to support.
That's something that we've had a lot of conversation over, and you brought that to my attention. Like, hey, maybe these big names and maybe this guy and that guy, they're not going to come run the show, but why don't we just build with the people we have? And I'm like, yeah, I mean, that's what we're trying to do anyways. But yeah, let's make your name. If you come run for us, we're going to make and you're successful, we're going to make you a household name because you're willing to put it on the line, and you're building that foundation. I mean, let's think about this. When was the pinnacle of the sport in your eyes?
The pinnacle of the sport in my eyes was, I don't even know if I can tie a year to it, but I can tell you a time of my life. And, I was young. I got into demolition derby late through, I always helped people. My parents would take me to the show, and, we would watch, and this sounds so cliche, but I always was like, man, this is so cool. How awesome would it be if I actually could derby? But I never thought it was something that I would be able to obtain. Until a friend, a local neighbor, actually, I grew up down the street from him. He always derbied, ran county fairs, and actually, we for a long time we were like enemies. You know, I was the little asshole neighbor kid. He couldn't stand me, and we ended up becoming friends. And I helped him out with his cars. And one year, he let me run a truck, and that's when I got hooked. But before leading up to that, I can remember at one of our local fairs, Lake County Fair, there was like 3 or 4 days of derby every year, you know, and you'd have a day show and a night show. And I mean, I remember people changing engines, using ratchet straps thrown over tree branches to pull engines out of their car, and people would rent U-Hauls, have all their pack their whole garage in a U-Haul, even though they only live 6 blocks away. They'd pack their whole garage in a U-Haul, and they'd have the U-Haul out there, and there's a big hill where people would park on. And I mean, people would work through the night. It was like something you'd see at, you know, Metal Mayhem or Spring Explosion, or, you know, any of these big shows that people go to at a county fair. And it seemed like hundreds of cars. And at that point in time in my life, I thought that was the greatest thing in the world. It was the coolest thing ever. And I didn't know that Demolition Derby was any bigger than that. I thought that I was at the biggest Demolition Derby in the world, you know? And as I got older and got more involved in this and started seeing, it actually started getting kind of depressing as I started going to these bigger shows. I think the first big show I ever went to was Spring Explosion back when Tori still had it. And I remember going, man, I mean, this is cool, but I saw this many cars at my county fair. So it's hard to say what I guess the actual pinnacle of derby was for me. But it seems that it is tapered off, but it looks like it's starting to come back. It feels like it's starting to come back. And I just think it's our job to pursue it and to get the younger generation involved, get them to buy in and teach them, educate them. You know, I started doing the TikTok thing myself and posted a video of a Chrysler, and I had a guy say, hey, I'm building an older Chrysler. I don't remember if it was a Cordova or what he was building. He's like, would you be willing to give me some tips? And I was like, absolutely, I'd love to, man. Message me, I'll tell you anything. And we need more of that. We need more of that going forward. And I think that'll breed the competition. If everybody feels that they're on a fair playing field, they're going to be more apt to want to come out and play.
Well, that's a great answer. And I say that because I wanted to talk about the health of the sport. You know, everything that you mentioned there is awesome. And I say, well, let's dig deeper on that. Let's talk about, we had county fairs across the Midwest, okay, which had hundreds of cars at them every single year. But we never had anything going back to any one organization. We never had anything going back to Demolition Derby. The money that was produced was either went to a county fair, it went to the payout, or minimal went to a promoter. And therefore, when I talk about like building a platform and building a stage today, we're almost starting over. Is if I was to tell you, if I was to say, hey, what's the NFL worth? People would say, oh, billions of dollars, right? Then I ask you, what's the NBA worth? They would come up with some number, right? And then I would say, what's Demolition Derby worth? Well, it's worth whatever the next derby is worth, because there is no collective value there, right? And if we've never built on that, like we've never kept our sport healthy. We've never given back to the sport. We've never said, all right, every event, it's almost like boxing. Okay. The UFC boxing, the reason why the UFC is the UFC today is because the UFC was organized, because the UFC realized that if you just take a piece of the pie, and you promote and you do this same form of, pretty similar form of fighting, right? And you're organized and you can go places. Boxing, every time a boxing match happens, they can't even get the best of the best to fight against each other anymore. Well, sounds pretty familiar to Derbian. Can't get the so-called best of the best to run against each other. And then it's a going out of sale deal. I can't tell you how many promoters are on the verge of just going out of business, and they do everything they can just to put on that next show. And it's because there's no health of the sport. There's no sustainability. I mean, everybody's just pulling in the opposite direction. I mean, it's like, man, we need to get together. And people say, well, work with promoters. Dude, not everybody wants to see the sport or see this grow to a sport. That's just how it is. A lot of people are even bigger names that we've talked about. I mean, a lot of people don't want to see it progress at all. It's the good old boys club, and they don't want to see it go anywhere. Well, if you want to become UFC and you want to get the sport healthy, and you've got to support the people that are trying to do that. You've got to you've got to see what you're supporting and understand what you're supporting. And again, that's why we're having these podcasts, because I want people to understand where this is going, where we want it to go, what it could do for you, and all the other drivers out there.
Yeah, listening to that, what kept popping in my head is greed. Unfortunately, the world we live in is driven by greed. And everybody views greed a little differently. I mean, greed to me is it's being selfish. It's caring about you and putting yourself first and what lines your pockets and what's best for you. And there's not much selflessness out there anymore. People are probably tired of hearing me talk about it, but if I go back to my buddy Tyler, with Adam and I trying to talk him into running, Adam's like, hey, I got a frame you can run. I'll give you the frame. I paid for it, but you can have it. I said, dude, I got a body for you. I'll open up my shop for you. I mean, in the typical thought, that's silly, right? The less people on the track, the better odds I have of winning. That's just math, right?
Yep.
But that's not what I want. I don't want a handicap. I don't want less people. I don't want less competition. I want better. I want more. I want, when I achieve something, I want it to be worth something. Like I don't want to go to my county fair where I know I got an overbuilt car and they're never going to know that it was overbuilt, and I just go out there and mop everybody up in 3 minutes and then I get my trophy. Like, that gets old. So instead of it being about me and what's best for me, I try to think of what's best for the Derby community or the Derby world, or whatever you want to relate to it as. And what's best is that we get more people involved and we share more knowledge and we breed more competition. Because if there's no competition, there's no drive. I mean, there has to be something worth competing for that's more than a trophy. Whether it's bragging rights, it's $50,000. It's the opportunity to learn from your mistakes, to involve new people, to get people excited. I can't tell you how many times I've fallen asleep watching the Derby on TV that was a 3-hour feature and everybody's just rubbing paint. That's not exciting. I'll be the first to admit, I can't tell you how many times I ordered a Derby, spent $70 for the weekend or whatever it was, and then was like, goodness gracious, why did I do that? That was a waste of money. And then think to myself, well, I'm glad I only spent $70, not $1,000 or a couple thousand to go down there and watch, because that wasn't that interesting. That didn't keep my attention.
And we really got to look.
All,
go ahead.
I think that's all rooted around the greed, and it's okay at a time to worry about you and what's best for you. But if we don't have an audience that enjoys watching, we don't have a reason to Derby. There has to be an entertainment factor, because just our entries aren't enough to pay for the facility and pay for the time it takes to clear the track and all of that stuff. We need spectators, right? And I think all of us, I don't know any Derby driver that I've ever talked to that says, I don't give a shit if those stands are full or not. I mean, that's important. That's what drove me to like Derby in the first place. Is I was the little kid in the stands that was so excited. I grew up watching Bobby Brockway. Had no idea who he was, just heard his name, and now, I mean, he's damn near a legend in the sport. And he ran my hometown fairs. Grew up watching him. He always put on a good show. Same thing with Adam Williams, and Jeremy Gard, and I mean, all those people are from my area. And I wanted to be the guy on the track and the little kids sitting in the stands going, "Oh my goodness, did you see that, Dad? Did you see that, Mom? That's so awesome. Can we please go back to the Derby next year?" I think a lot of people have lost sight of that. And it's driven by the greed, in my opinion.
What's the number one? Well, I say this, and it's not, they don't always say it, but like NASCAR, other professional motorsports, that's like one of the first things they say when they get out. Hey, I just want to thank all the fans for being here. I don't hear Derby drivers say that. I don't. Hey, do you want to thank anyone? I don't really hear a lot where it's like, I want to thank all the fans for being here. And and I think that's because we don't quite understand what makes all this happen. It's entertainment. The reason why you get to do what you want to do is, and there's so much money on the line right here, is because the fans came to watch, and that's, to me, I'm like, how do I get these drivers to be a part of the promotion? Like, I need you to be telling people about this show, and I need Pete to be telling about this show, and I need Trace to be telling, we need everybody to be telling everybody about the show. Like, hey, this is the biggest show, highest payout in the country, blah, 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 blah. Like, I'm going to go, try to win this thing, man, and come celebrate with me in victory lane. If I do, you need that. And we've lost it. And I don't, like you said, it's greed. You mentioned something along with that. You've mentioned something in our past conversations, is the drivers have became like singular focused, meaning it's just about them. Like, it's only become about them rather than where they're going, and that's why they don't show anything. That's why they don't tell people where they're going or anything like that, because it's become a selfish deal. And we've got to reroute that, man. We've got to get this going in a direction where, hey, these fans, they can raise these payouts if the promoter is willing to do it, right? I mean, the promoter just can't rake it all in. Like, he's got to understand, that this is a team effort.
Yeah, it's getting people to the place where they realize if you build the pie big enough, it's worth just having a little piece. So many people are focused on, they want the whole pie. They don't want a piece of the pie. They want the whole pie. Like I said, I'll repeat it. If we build that pie big enough, a little piece of that pie is going to be way bigger than the whole pie you have right now. And that's where we need to capture people and bring people back to it. And anything you compare it to, whether it's sports or compare it to music, somebody who I listen to, I've had the opportunity to meet, Aaron Lewis. I follow him, and I spend a lot of time watching his social media because they do such an amazing job of promoting his acoustic shows and the small venues he plays at. And, it's always a huge shout out. First thing is thanks for everybody that came and watched, thanks for everybody who bought tickets. Thanks for everybody that came out. Because the guy's super humble. And I mean, obviously he knows that he's good, but he also knows no matter how good he is, if those seats out there are empty, it doesn't matter. And that's what we need to capture with our people, with our drivers, is you can be the best driver out there. You can build the hardest car, and you can win weekend after weekend after weekend after weekend. But if all you're doing is sustaining your pocket, there's going to come a day where that weekend isn't available because there was nobody out there watching to support that weekend. So once again, greed. We have to realize that if we want this, that's going to be something sustainable and continue to grow and not just be something stagnant, that's the same thing day in and day out, we all have to support each other. We have to support healthy competition. We have to support the promoters. We have to support the new guys that don't know that, hey, I've never built a derby car, or I've only ran gut and go, or, what the heck does this mean that I can have, 14-inch shock on top of my plate? What does that mean? A lot of people, I was somebody that I didn't know any of that stuff. The first truck I ran was built by somebody else. I had helped put it together. I was a good welder, so I was always told, hey, weld this and weld that. And I had thoughts, but I mean, I was fortunate that a friend of mine introduced me to Adam Williams, and I didn't really give Adam a choice. I forced him to take me under his wing, and I probably annoyed the hell out of him because he's a man of very few words. And his way of teaching is, here, do this. And then, well, you did that wrong. But that's where I learned a lot, and that's what got me into the sport. And the same, Jason Brzezinski, got invited to go up to his house one weekend and help him with a car. And I mean, that developed a lifelong friendship. Same thing with Uncle B, Brian Narrett. They started teaching me. I learned things from them and conversations, and Ryan Songalewski, people all across, they're willing to give this stuff to certain people. And it's awesome. And there's a lot of people out there that are hungry for the knowledge, but they're scared to reach out for it. And the reason they're scared is because there's so many people that have just been out for themselves that aren't willing to teach or talk or show you, or, answer a question on the internet, or answer your PM, or answer a text message. And I constitute all that to greed for the most part. I mean, yeah, we have to have healthy competition. Everybody has their own personal little, tricks or quirks, things they do a certain way. Some people crease their fenders with three ribs through there. Some people do 5. Some people swear you don't need to crease your fender, right? So everybody has their own quirks. But there's a huge hunger out there. There's a huge thirst for knowledge. And I think we have to be willing to give back, to think outside of ourselves and think, hey, my thought process is, at the end of the day, if me sharing how I built my car or what I did with the next person is what cost me to win the Derby, then I need to drive better.
Exactly. And when you're talking about that, I don't think we have a shortage of drivers being willing to help, like if you ask, but I think we have a shortage of people at the top being willing to share collective knowledge, over the social media platforms. Like, that's the next level. That's what we're trying to get people. Because, if I send you a text, Travis, and say, hey, can you help me out on this? You're helping one person. But if you make a video, or you do a podcast, or you just be yourself and be real, on these podcasts, and you're going to reach thousands, maybe tens of thousands, maybe 100,000 people, out there. That's like that next level. Then that's where we need to go. That's what we need to get guys to be. Hey, look, we can change this overnight because we can reach so many. Let's look at these social media deals, platforms, as like just a boost to where we want to get. Not like oh, well, he's on social media, he's doing this, he's showing that. Because, dude, in our reality, you can, and especially in this format, like, you can have as hard a car as you want. If you can't drive the thing, adios to your wheels and your steering, because somebody's going to take it from you.
Absolutely. And that I agree with you. I agree. Social media is a good platform. I would like to think, if I have one person reach out to me from anywhere and ask, hey, how do you set your suspension up? Or what do you do with your bumpers? Or, what do you think a good bumper height is? Or whatever the question is, I would like to think that if I answer that one person, that one person's going to go tell 3 more people. And those 3 people are going to tell 3 people. And we can spread knowledge that way. I hope that that's how it works. It might not work like that. And I'm somebody that doesn't have a problem. I'm new to social media and TikTok and the Facebook Reels, and I'm learning my way through it. But that's my plan. I mean, I run a little short on time, but my plan is to document my build for the King with TikTok or with Facebook, or take videos and do a collab as I have time to put it together, so that people can see, hey, if you got a welder and a set of rules, you can build to come run for 50,000. It doesn't. You don't have to have the best of the best. It's sure nice. I mean, it's great when you got a ski cradle and you got the trans brace and everything. Yeah, that's really helpful. But there's in the rules, it allows you other ways to add to your car if you don't have that, or if you choose not to run it. So I plan to document my build and the way I'm doing it with my equipment. And I encourage anybody that has questions. I'm not claiming to be a guru or a master or a professional by any means, but I'm willing to share knowledge if there's somebody that's stumped, if they're unsure, if they don't know what to do or how to do or what the best way is. I'm more than willing to share that knowledge. Take it for what you want. Maybe it's a good idea. Maybe it's a bad idea. Who knows? Maybe we're going to go out there and I make one hit, my car folds in half. But I'm willing to share the information I use to make it do that.
Absolutely. I mean, there's people right now that are there's people right now that are building cars for county fairs, that are building cars for different promoters, that are going to run for a tenth of the money, a fifth of the money. And it's like they're doing that because they think they can't compete. And we've got to get through to them like, dude, you can compete. You can compete. Amen. Because if there's a will, there's a way, right? And I don't give a shit if you run kickers in your car or you got a full cradle. Dude, we got plenty of people that are coming with just kickers. And I can tell you right now, there is no way in hell that you're going to bend a car if you're hitting tires and you have kickers in it. There's no way. It's not going to happen. Now you start full throttling people nose to nose and this and that. Well, yeah, your car's going to bend, but probably so is the guy that has a full cradle. He's going to bend in front of the A-arms. I mean, everyone knows that. You can't run it like that, so you got to be strategic. And how do we get to those guys that are building those cars, say, you know what, screw it, I'm going to give it a shot, and fill this thing and get it to 50K and help promote the show. Don't just come run, don't just sign up, promote the show, promote where you're running, be proud of where you're running, be proud that you're running for someone or running with someone, a promoter, that's willing to put this type of money on the line. I mean, it isn't like we've made any money to this point, contrary to popular belief out there. You haven't made any money at this point. I mean, all this is just giving back. Imagine if we do mess around and make this thing successful. We'll take it as big as you guys want to take it. And that is my commitment to you guys,
Understood. And I'll tell you our plan straight up. We're going to come run the King. Then obviously I believe it's 2 weeks after that. Iron City Promotions has a class that we can take the cards to.
Yep.
And then the build isn't anything crazy to where we can't bring what's left over, batch it together, and run it at our county fairs locally for the rest of the summer. And that's the same line I used when I was telling Tyler, hey man, to heck with the car you were patching together for the county fair, build this fresh one, go run the King, hopefully kick mine and Adam's ass, win 50 grand, come back here and teach us how to drive at the county fairs with the car you used to win the King. And then we saw the show for Iron City Promotions, and that's another big motivation. It's kind of a haul for us, but I think we'll make it there. It'll be a great thing. And like you said, there's someone out there right now building a car for their county fair. Most county fair rules are pretty lax. You're allowed to build a pretty decent car. So, and I highly doubt your county fair is before Father's Day weekend. At least around us, all of our county fair stuff starts, second week of July, I think. So why wouldn't you, instead of putting that, time and effort and thousands of dollars into a car to go run for 500 or maybe at the most $2,000, go run the King. Even in my opinion, you build a car, even if you lose both your first heats, you still got plenty of car to pass together for the summer, and I challenge everybody to step up and take that leap, go for it. It's a mindset. And I tell everybody, I'm not the most experienced. I don't have the most time on the track. I've ran less derbies than most of the people that are going to be listening to this, I'm sure. But it's a mindset. If you put me and Pete Hanson and Trace Braun on the track at the same time, statistically speaking, Pete and Trace probably have a better chance of coming out on top. In my mind, that doesn't exist. I think, man, I got just as good a chance of beating Pete as Pete does me. And the same with Trace or with Adam or with Bob Whitaker or with Brockway or any of the big name drivers. They don't have any advantage that I don't have, in my opinion. That's my mind. That's the way I think. And if we can get everybody else to think the same way, then we can go take that competition to the track and see how that works out.
Well, most battles are won before they are fought. And that is a warrior's mindset right there. That's the killer be killed. When you hear our drivers meeting, you're going to hear me say things like that. That's that mindset. Most battles are won before they are fought. And that's mentally, the mental aspect of this game needs to be as sharp as the physical and the build aspect of this game. I mean, this tests everything,
Absolutely. And that's I like the way you said that, a warrior's mindset. And I mean, that's what we are in this. We're warriors. We're gladiators. It's grueling, right? It's going to be a long weekend. It's going to be a long build to get there. And no matter what way you look at it, whether you win your first two heats or you lose your first two heats, or you win one, lose one, win one, however it works out, it's a long weekend, and everybody's going to be a warrior or a gladiator to get through it. And that's important that people address it with that mindset and with that confidence. The only thing that you have to lose is not trying. You'll never know how you stack up. You'll never know where you place. You'll never know where you're at if you don't put yourself on the field and compare yourself to everybody else on the track. That's where you got to start. And that's like, to go back to what we said earlier, that's why I was so dumbfounded that it didn't fill, that the 100 spots weren't sold out the first day. I thought I was waiting to see the post on Facebook for people offering to buy a spot at the King, and hey, I need a spot for the King class. Anybody getting rid of? I really thought that's the way it would be, with that kind of money on the line and the build that's available and all the different options you have. Especially with Derby world has come as far as technology and the things we've learned. I mean, take the route of, you can't afford the best equipment, right? You can't afford the ski cradle. You can't afford the Narrett bell and the tail housing. You can't afford a brand new impact rear end or whatever, right? So you go the route of, you're running a lower cradle. I believe that's the rules, right? Lower cradle, you can run the kickers. You got your outer trans brace has got to be a factory bell, but you're allowed to have like your bar style trans brace on there. And then you go to a rear end, say you don't have 3, 4, 5, 6, I don't know, however much rear ends are, you don't have the money for that. And go to your local junkyard. My local junkyard sells 14 bolt rear ends. You pull it, it's $125. Go get yourself a 14 bolt rear end, spend a couple bucks and get a pinion brake for it. Maybe build your own hub savers, whatever. You're in. You got all the equipment you need now. 14 bolts. I mean, any derby you watch, I don't care if it's Blizzard Bash or it's Bash for Cash or it's out there on the East Coast at the Reaper shows. 14 bolts are all over, man. I mean, there's some people running them not braced. There's some people leaving them as a full floater and just throwing a simple brace on it. It's a great rear end. I got a buddy. I mean, if you guys see my TikTok, we built a Cadillac and it's got an old style 14 bolt in it. It's out of like a 77 and it's basically unbraced. We put a little top truss on it for years. It's in a 70s Cadillac that's been on the track 4 times. It's won 4 times. I ran the rear end in a truck, never had a problem with it. So there's no excuse for people to go, man, I can't afford that $5,000 rear end, and I can't afford that $2,000 cradle, and because the rules allow for you to do other things. If you can't afford that cradle, or say you just don't want to run that cradle, I'll donate the 2x2 to you if you need it. Whatever we got to do to get people excited, because I want to see 100 people out there, because I want the competition. I want to be able to run for the 50 grand, and I want to see new faces and new people that build a confidence of going, hey man, I went to a big show, I held my own, or man, I got junked in the first heat. Some people came up and talked to me, they gave me some hints. My carburetor wasn't quite right, someone jumped in and helped me tune it. I went out there in my last chance qualifier, the losers bracket, and I did better. I won. I want to see those stories develop. So whatever I have to do to help you, or to help these guys, to help the Derby world get there, I'm all in.
Absolutely. Well, look, having these conversations is the start of that, because I got a buddy that does all my apparel and stuff. His name's Tyson Mobley, and Troy Boggs. We talk all the time, and I talk to you and a handful of other people pretty frequently, about all this stuff. And what it became apparent is when that didn't fill right, and what we were advertising, and very reasonable entry fee based on what is paid. I mean, we tried to make it as reasonable as we could. Initially, we thought it had to be $1,000, but we're eating a large portion of that purse. That entry fee does not cover the purse. And people think, oh yeah, it does. No, it does not. You need to add those numbers up again if you think so. We're eating and we're willing to eat it, but I guess what we came to the conclusion was education. We needed to educate people on hey, you can compete on, and you, this should be your Daytona 500 rather than winning a county fair. Win one of these heats. Beat a so-called big name at this show. If they're coming, we needed that education, and what you're doing here and willing to talk about this and that, that's more important than anything else. Like you're doing your part, you're not just talking about it. I talk about what we're doing all the time. Right. And I can guarantee you that the people can accuse me of a lot of things. They're never going to accuse me of talking about it and not being about it, because when we didn't like where the Derby world was, or what the competition level was, guess what we did? We put our money on the line, and we came up with a format, and we said, hey, here it is. And we're paid more money than anyone else. We're going to be about it, and we need to find who else is going to be about it too.
And I think that's coming. I told you before, I think this year will be a turning point for it. I think there's a lot of forward momentum, and I think there's a lot of new faces that are buying in and are excited where it's headed. And I mean, I really hope that this is the turning point, that, this is the year that brings everybody together and at the same table, and everybody going, hey, how do we make this bigger? What do we got to do? It's time. It might be crazy talk. People might think it's crazy talk, but I don't see any reason why Demolition Derby can't be a nationally sanctioned sport. I mean, if you can turn on the TV and watch a pickleball tournament or ping pong tournament, I mean, you can't tell me that that's more exciting, more captivating than watching two, couple ton cars crashing into each other, battling for $50,000. That's way more captivating. I think you could put a poll out there to the United States and say, would you rather watch a ping pong tournament or a demolition derby? I think everybody's going to say a demolition derby.
And to that, I ask you why. Why are we not there? We've got to look in the mirror. We're not there because of us. We're not
because of greed.
Yeah, we're not doing the things necessary to take it there. we're not standing of course I'm, biased towards my promotion, right? But nobody else is doing the things that we're willing to do. Nobody else is forward thinking and what needs to happen. The format exists not for just competition, but for entertainment, for the sport to crown a champion. There's all these things that exist. You're going to need to have that, in those ping pong matches. They don't have draws. They don't say, oh, look how hard this guy, serves a ping pong. And that's the highlight of the derby. No, they don't highlight that. They highlight the skill of it going back and forth, 30 times before someone, scores that point. So when we did this and we had this forward thinking of the format and this and that, it's because we're trying to create what you just said. Like, we're trying to bring this to a nationally recognized sport and get these big sponsors. I mean, hell, I got Jegs involved and UNOH involved. I mean, we caught as much flack for that, as we did Good Gracious. And it just kind of showed you where we were at. Like, really? Like, that's where we're at. We'd rather just like make fun of this than get behind it and support it. That's a weird spot we're in, and it just kind of like, man, it got me looking in the mirror like, okay, if that's where we're at as a sport, then what do we got to do better to appeal to more people? What education piece do we got to put out there? Because, man, I tell you, there's not a conversation. I just had a conversation the other day with Levi Diem, and there's not a conversation that I have with somebody one-on-one that I don't feel that we walk away and say, man, yeah, you're right. This I like what this is, but we got to explain it. So that's where these podcasts and whatnot come into play. But it's just we can get there, man. I know we can get there. I believe wholeheartedly we can get there, but we're not going to get there. We're not going to get there by supporting something that doesn't give back to the sport. We're not going to get there by not keeping our sport healthy. We're not going to get there by not having any bumps along the way, so we're going to get there by you guys coming forward and saying, look, this is the direction we want to go. And rather than looking at it as a Triple D thing or a Dustin Woods thing, looking at it as a Demolition Derby thing. We are going to take Demolition Derby to the next level. And we're going to do it because there's nobody going to stop us. That's why.
Yeah, I look forward to seeing it come to fruition. I think as long as the drive is there and the passion is there and the intensity stays, I don't see yourself or anybody else that gets on board coming up short. As one thing about derby drivers, in my opinion, is we don't really take no for an answer, whether it's in the tech line, whether it's from our wives that say you got to hang that helmet up, or whatever the situation may be. We've all been on the track when we know we should be looking at an official because they're telling us we're timed out, right? But we don't look at them. We don't take that no. We keep our eyes forward. We're trying to get it started. We're trying to make sure we make them shine the light in our eyes, throw a clod of dirt at us, spray us with a water hose, whatever. We earn the fact that we got to break our stick because we don't take no for an answer. And it's the same thing here. We shouldn't take no for an answer. We should continue to push and build and work together to actually build a community, to build a sport, to build something that is memorialized, something that we create that's not to be forgotten. What doesn't matter what sport you look at, whether it's Babe Ruth in baseball or football with Brett Favre or Tom Brady or Walter Payton, NASCAR with Dale Earnhardt, Rusty Wallace, whoever, any sport out there, you can name a famous person. Arnold Palmer. I mean, I know a lot of people don't know he was a golfer, but whatever, Then you get into the Demolition Derby world where, because we've been so individualized and we've been so greedy, there's a lot of memorialization that hasn't taken place. We've talked about this, and I think it's funny. to name some names, Mark Elliott, man, there's people that think Mark Elliott's an announcer. He's one of the greatest innovators, one of the greatest wheelmen we had in this sport, and obviously back at what was that 2019 when he ran, obviously he had to prove that he was more than an announcer, but we're back to that stage where people know Mark Elliott because he's an announcer. They don't know that he was a driver, a hell of a wheelman. And same thing with Toby Hiley. I can't tell you how many people I run into that go, "Oh yeah, Toby the inspector. Yeah, he's an inspector." They don't know what Tinkerbell is. They don't know what Toby did for the sport. And even now that he's back on the track and he's running some shows, there's people going, "Watch out for who? What? Well, you mean that inspector?" And to me, that's sad. That's a sad aspect that we've been so personally focused for so long that the great names of our sport haven't been memorialized because we never created the platform for that to be. There is no demolition derby archives, if you will, so as new people come to our sport, because we've been so disorganized and so self-centered for so long, these new people come in and they have no background to look at, unless your uncle's been in it for a long time or your dad knew somebody or whatever. But if it's just a group of 15-year-old kids 16-year-old kids, their parents aren't even have nothing to do with demolition derby, and these kids get involved out of their own curiosity, there's not much education out there. There's not much, archives or documentation of what demolition derby is or where it started and how it's progressed, and the different cliques from the East Coast to the Midwest to the West Coast and North and South and so on. And all of that stuff should exist, and it's very real possibility that it could exist if we all get on the same page and we push for the same goal and we build that gigantic pie that's worth having just a little piece of.
You're so right. There's so many things that click there for me, and including, not knowing these guys and what they've done for the sport. There's just no media there to cover things, good, bad stories, action on the track, who won these derbies. I mean, there's no like Hall of Fame. None of these things exist because, we've existed as a sport for 30 years, and people hate to hear this, but we've never built a foundation, and we've never built on the foundation. And because of that, our superstars haven't become superstars, or are unwilling to become superstars. Our sport has been stagnant, and we need to get back to that. We need to create that foundation. I mean, there should be one event, like the Daytona 500. There should be one event that has existed the last 30 years that people are like, that's the event. If you win that, you will be you're a Hall of Famer, if you win that event. There isn't. It was Metal Mayhem there for a while. It was Dent back in the day. It was Bash for Cash. It was Blizzard Bash. Now, obviously, we're transitioning to our King Show. Like, it's just been a handful of events. There's no crown jewels, and that's our fault. As a sport, we got to look in the mirror. There needs to be these crown jewels. There needs to be people covering that. We should be able to talk on here. And another thing that we're missing is people aren't willing to take polarizing opinions on things. Look, me and you, we might not agree on who the best of the best is or how this went down and this and that, but people aren't willing to even do it, and because of that, we're doing our sport a disservice. How many conversations do you think happened in the garage with youngsters, educating them on when those guys took those Fords out to Meadow Mayhem? There's not a lot, Hey, this is when the Fords really got put on the map. Well, who put them on the map? Well, Toby and Mark. They really put them on the map, and maybe it was a different show, but nobody's talking about that. We gotta have these conversations, and we're just not having them. I think the Derby world is hungry to hear him.
Absolutely. I know the Derby world's hungry. You know, I've got an 8-year-old son. He'll be 9 in April. He hangs out in the shop with us quite a bit. Kid's actually a hell of a welder for his age. But he refers to Adam as Uncle Adam, which I think is great. And that's where Adam's been in the Derby world a lot longer than I have. I look up to him. You know, I've got several mentors that I look up to, but you know, Adam fills me in on a lot of stuff. He was running big shows before I knew what big shows were. And he's the one that educated me on Mark Elliott and Toby Hiley and Toast and Metal Mayhem. And, you know, he was my introduction to Bobby Brockway. And, you know, he'll sit in the shop with us or whatever and explain to me or tell Camden, you know, who this person is or how this came about. And we need that. And we need it to be, I guess, put into a media platform of some sort so that education does exist and the future does understand it. You know, I think it's great that my son, I got to stop referring to him as my little guy because he's not so little anymore, can go to not just the county fairs here, but he can go to a Spring Explosion or the King of Ohio or whatever and hear a driver's name, whether it be Toby or Trace or Pete Hanson or Jason Brzezinski or whoever it may be. And he gets excited about that. You know, I think it's awesome. I actually have a video from when he was maybe 3 years old and we were playing with cars, you know, having our own demolition derby. And he was being the announcer too. And he was Jason Brzezinski at the show, you know, as he's pushing his car on the track. He says, Jason Brzezinski pulls on the track. And I'm like, oh, you're Jason? He's like, yeah, I'm Jason. I'm like, well, who am I? He tells me that I was Adam. So Adam and Jason were battling on the track. And I mean, I think that's cool. That's awesome. And that's what our sport needs. Because every other sport has that, right? There's a kid out there that he's pretending to be Walter Payton. And there's a kid out there that he's Rusty Wallace or Dale Earnhardt, or, you know, there's Halloween costumes modeled after these people. And I don't think that that's an unrealistic expectation for our sport, as long as everybody else believes that big. You know, it's awesome to have goals and it's awesome to have dreams and it's awesome to chase them. We just got to get everybody to buy in and realize that the possibility's there, and we don't want to lose it. You know, I don't want one day to be sitting there talking to my grandkids or whatever and being like, yeah, we used to crash cars for fun, you know, back when we still could. And if we keep going in the direction that we're going of being self-centered and greedy and what about me, then I think there's a very good possibility that we'll run into a situation where demolition derby is the thing of the past, or it is just, you know, a county here or a county there still has a show. Because like anything else that's not, you don't stay on top of it, it becomes a lost art.
What happens when all cars become $5,000, except and we only have county fairs to run at that pay $1,500? Like, the sport dies quicker, right?
Absolutely. I compare our sport a lot of times to the local roundy round guys, whether you're racing on asphalt or you're racing a dirt track, you know. This is my comparison quite a bit. Those guys are, for the most part, they're fortunate. There's class you can run that's a full tube chassis, or you need a metric GM, and they're plentiful, and you know, you can make them last. They're spending big money though. You know, that these guys got big money into engines and parts and wheels and tires, and no matter what surface you're running on, they're spending big money, and they're going out there to run Friday night for $300, you know. And it's purely a hobby for them. That's it. Just like fishing, you know, if you're into fishing, you got thousands of dollars in tackle, you got thousands of dollars into or tens of thousands of dollars into a boat, and the chances of you ever making a penny back on that is slim to none. That's something that I think is unique about our sport, is if you do things right, the initial investment's expensive, but if you follow through with it, you can earn your money back. You know, hell, with this show, you could earn your money back in a year.
And we're not even organized, man. Like, we're about to pay 50,000 and we're not even organized. Like, we may not even make money on the show, but think about like if we get organized and we start making money on these shows and we can get bigger sponsors and people involved like that. We can get TV contracts. We can, all of those things. What is it? $250,000? Is it $500,000? Do we have $1 million derby someday? Because it's quite possible that we have a circuit in which guys make a living doing this. It's just we have to come together, right?
Right. Absolutely. Everybody's got to be on the same page. If, like I said, compare us to any sport. Look at NASCAR. If all of a sudden NASCAR, the drivers, the track owners, the sponsors, whatever, decided, you know what? I don't need you. I don't need you. And I don't need you. And this is about me. And this is about me. And this is about me. It's going to fall apart. It's going to crumble. It's a huge dynamic. For NASCAR to be the success that it is, has taken a lot of work to get there. And it takes all of the drivers, the promoters, the sponsors, the track owners. It takes everybody working together to keep NASCAR at what it is, and if at any one time, any one person decides, you know what, I own this track, it's mine, and quote unquote, NASCAR isn't doing enough for me, I'm out. I promise you that what they have left after they're out is nothing compared to the small piece of the pie they had while they were in. Absolutely. That's got to be our main focus.
And I think it starts with the drivers, man. You got to get the drivers to say, look, I hear what you guys are saying. I see what you're about. I'm going to stop building for county fairs. I'm going to stop building for this show or that show. And I'm going to come pay it forward. Even if I don't win, I'm going to pay it forward. So that way this sport can be a sport and be something someday where I take my kids to and grandkids to, where, it's the big stage. And I'm very proud to stand alongside these other motorsports icons. It starts with the drivers though, man. I mean, getting promoters together is going to be very difficult. I've tried to have conversations with other promoters. You got to get people on the same page. The drivers control it. The tail wags the dog here, and the drivers, man, it's got to start with the drivers.
100%. I mean, anywhere you look, that's the way it works. The drivers should be the ones in control, right? We should be the ones there supporting those that supported us, or are supporting us. And any driver could make or break a show, right? Look at Blizzard Bash. If everybody got together and said, you know what, I'm done running Blizzard Bash. Blizzard Bash could spend all the money they wanted. They could promote, they could have whatever commercials, they could do anything they wanted to do. And if they couldn't get their drivers to show up, that'd be the end of that show. If all the drivers, let's just say, this controversial subject that's out there, we see it coming. Let's just say all the drivers say, you know what? We're not going to Topeka. We're going to South Dakota. We're going to Gold Rush. We're going to go run Sam's show, right? Let's say that happens. That's the drivers in control, right? The driver said, you know what? We're done at Blizzard Bash for whatever the reasons are. We're going to South Dakota. Blizzard Bash ain't going to happen now, right? Because without the drivers, there's no show.
100%.
And that's
that's where the drivers got to understand what they're supporting, right? They got to understand and make an educated decision on, all right, like, I want to know where this promoter wants to go. I want to know what this promoter is really about. If I'm going to support this show and run on this stage, or not support this show and run this stage, I got to do it for educated reasons, because it's really going to shape the sport. You guys making your decisions. If tomorrow, we have 100 cars signed up, I mean, that's a big statement. Same thing out there. It's really going to shape where the sport goes, those decisions.
I think something that often gets overlooked that really needs to be focused on I've been someone that hasn't focused on it myself. There is a time where it's okay to say, what about me? And I think when it comes to payouts and stuff like that, that's a great time to say, what about me? I don't have the facts written down in front of me, but how many years was Blizzard Bash $40,000 to win? You know, that was just what they paid out, or 30,000 to win, and it didn't matter that they sold out the venue night after night, weekend after weekend, year after year. They sold it out. They sold it out. They sold it out. They just left the payout where the payout was, right?
Yep.
Well, me as a driver, I would like to say that I'd like to get all the other drivers together and go, hey, what are we doing? You know, we're making this guy rich. We, the drivers, are the reasons that this show is selling out. We are the reason, 100%, you know, and we're not getting given back to. Nobody's giving back to us. Nobody's doing what they should be doing for us. Why do we keep doing it for them? Why do we keep selling their show out over and over for them to pay us the same, you know? And that's where we need to bring our focus. You know, how many county fairs do you run? And you're one of the reasons, you're a driver, you're one of the reasons that the grandstand sold out, the fair board made 100 grand, and you walked away with maybe 1,000 in your pocket. So you're putting your time and effort in to support somebody else getting rich off you, but you won't pause for a second and go, hey, you know what? Look at this Triple D Entertainment guy that if I support him, if I send off just $600 as an entry fee and I build a car to go run his show, win, lose, or draw, there's going to be a video about me out there. There's going to be my name out there. And he's giving me the opportunity to win 50 grand. This is a huge start. You know, last year was 25, which this year is 50. And I'm sure that's not because you made an extra 25,000 off the show last year that you wanted to put towards the purse this year.
We didn't make any money. It was no secret. Okay. I mean, you can look
Right.
in the grandstands. Okay. There's no money made. And look, people, let's talk about those payouts. People, you know, I'll throw a bash for cash in there. That, you know, that payout didn't change for 15 years, 12 years, 15 years. Blizzard Bash didn't change. Do you know when it changed? Is when there was a little competition, is when we paid more. That's it. That's the only reason why it changed. And you just wonder what drivers are thinking. Like, are they thinking about that? Like, are they seeing who actually changed it? Because we changed it without making any money on our show. Now, imagine if our show is a success and we can look up in the grandstands together and say, wow, look at all these people here that, you know, we're entertaining, that are paying to see you guys. Imagine what we can do then.
Right. I mean, that's where the one hand washes the other comes in. And, you know, you bring it up bash for cash. That's a huge one. I remember looking at that going, wow, 10 grand again, 10 grand again, 10 grand again. And then I remember looking at, oh, there was a price increase for registration, but it's the same payout. Oh, pit passes got more expensive.
I mean, Travis, you got people on their on the flyer. They'll take 50 cars. Okay. And that's $150 entry fee. They're bringing what is 50 cars and $150 entry fee? 50 times 150, that's 7,500, and they'll pay 2,500, a $3,500 or $4,000 purse. And you got people filling it up. It's right. Like they just made 3,500 off of one class just in entry fees. Not alone, not even talking about, you know, the people that are coming there, you know, and paying the general admission. Like, what are we doing? You know, meanwhile we pay $5,000 last year for front wheel drive for just 60 cars and rear wheel drive. And we can't get 60 front wheel drive cars. But I went to county fairs across Ohio last year where they had 60 front wheel drive cars for $800.
Right.
Where is that disconnect? Like, what, where's that at? Well, why are we willing to basically build county fairs for the past 25 years? I mean, we've built county fairs. When's the last time you've seen a building built at a county fair that was a demolition derby building? Because they all
Yeah,
should
no,
be demolition derby buildings because we build them all. You know what I'm saying? Like
absolutely.
we built the whole damn fairgrounds, and there's nothing that's for us. And the reason being is because there's no organization standing up for it. Tim, I don't know if people know this, but we don't really mess with county fairs, in Ohio. We will if it's the right fit for us, but we're not doing things for free, and just not doing it. And I'm not going to ask my team to work for free. It's just not going to happen. But Tim's, going around and asking for $2,000 more for each county fair. Well, why is he doing that? Because we're having this conversation, because we're bringing up that they're making 50, 60, $70,000 in a night. I mean, that's a problem. That
Right.
Go ahead.
The amount of cars, this highlighted something for me. The amount of cars that I see turn up at a derby that doesn't even have an advertised payout. That's a big thing around us. There's a promoter, it's International Demolition Derby. They do county fairs, and they don't even have an advertised payout. Not even like hey, if we get 20 cars, it's this. There is no advertised payout. You don't know what the payout is until the day of the show. But there's a line of cars waiting to get in, and I don't understand that. You will go run for a promoter at a county fair, building just as competitive as a car as you would take to the king for an undetermined amount of money, right? You get there, you might be running for 800, you might be running for 200. Who knows? So you get there with all of that unknown. Then you find out, yep, we're going to pay your class $500. So,
I'm not sure I understand.
So you go out there and you run. And then you see this flyer come around on the internet that there's a show that's only taking 100 cars. And if they get that 100 cars, they're guaranteeing a $50,000 payout. They explain the percentage thing. So we know it's over 50. So we know it's a guaranteed 25,000 right now, right?
Yep.
That's guaranteed.
Yep.
You won't spend a couple months and a couple bucks building a car to go run for 25 grand, but you will to go run for an undetermined amount of money, or to go run for the same amount you have for the past 10 years, even though everything else has gotten more expensive, your fuel, your parts, I'm sure your registration. I mean, it seems like every year the registration fee for a derby increases at the county fairs. The grandstand tickets are more expensive, and you'll go support that. And that's something that's not giving back to the derby world at all. That's a strictly business move. County fair demolition derbies are strictly business.
And I don't understand how we're not allowed to operate in a business mode. Because
right.
if I pay out a percentage, right, of the entries that show up, like last year, the trucks or pro stock, right? We paid out percentage of the entries that show up. People are like, well, that's bullshit. I'm loading my car up, it was supposed to pay 10 grand. It's like, no, we advertise. We're like, we don't shy away from, we pay not what shows up, but what entries come in. Like we don't shy away from it. And it's like, why am I not allowed to demand that, like, hey, look, we'll pay more than anybody out there. We just need cars. We need the entertainment to show up. I mean, I'm held to the fire for that,
Right. But someone will go run a fair that has no guaranteed purse or no guaranteed payout, or hell, even at that, I've ran fairs where at the end of it, what they said in the driver's meeting, we're going to pay this, this, and this. And then you go get your trophy and they hand you $300 and you say, hey, we all voted. It was supposed to be $800 winner take all. Oh yeah, you're right. Well, we already paid out second and third. Well, okay. Well, then who's coming off the other 500 that they promised me when it was winner take all? you know? Why do we support that nonsense? But we as drivers don't go, hey, there's somebody out there that wants to give back to us. There's somebody out there that wants to help build this sport and take it to the next level. Let's fill his show. Let's give him the opportunity, which I don't know. You could be full of shit, man. This could all be to benefit you, but I'm going to give you the opportunity and I'm going to find out for myself. I'm going to see if it's worth it. Which everything I see on paper, everything I've watched on YouTube, the conversations I've had with you, it all seems worth it. I've heard the bullshit out there that this was rigged or that was rigged, and I've seen everything on video to debunk that. So I just really think that there's a situation of blind compliance out there, that people just have this thought process of, oh, those are the big names. Oh, that's a big show. I got to be a big somebody to go run there, and you don't. It ain't no different than going to run your county fair, other than it's probably better organized and there's a better piece of the pie waiting for you.
Well, that's where I think it's a little bit deeper. I think, these guys are making these decisions sometimes based on competition, sometimes, based on money, sometimes based on teams. I think a lot of these people, really make decisions on where they're running based on if they can win, and if they can bring their buddies there and take home, who, it doesn't matter who wins within the buddies, but somebody's going to win tonight. And that's, I say shame on Demolition Derby for allowing that to be the mentality. Shame on Demolition Derby for saying, or basically coaching these guys to go cherry pick shows. I mean, you've heard the term cherry pick. I mean,
absolutely.
That's a very common thing that happens. And I'm not saying just cherry pick shows. I'm saying cherry pick classes. I'm saying running hard, cherry pick inspectors where they don't inspect cars, and some car is just blatantly way harder than any other car out there. Like, shame on everyone that participated in that leading up to this, because I think this issue is a little deeper than that. I think it's about these people just want the hardest car to blow things apart rather than true competition. And that's what we've got to get back, man. That's what we've got to do.
Yeah. There's definitely a lot of cherry picking. There's a lot of classes that come up out of nowhere, that now all of a sudden somebody's famous because they ran a minivan, or a mini SUV or a Ford Ranger, or and this comes back to that video I put out about getting in where you fit in, and I talked about splitting, like that has become so popular where, yeah, let's all five of us go to this show, we'll take everybody else out, and then we'll take the top five and we'll split that purse amongst the five of us. Like, what did you just win? It's not a team show. If you want to run a team show, go run a team show. But how are you proud that you went somewhere with five people, you team drove your ass off against the rest of the pack, you took the top five, then you split the money, this guy got pushed in the corner, this guy broke a stick. That's nothing to be proud of. That's participation trophy stuff. That'd be like showing up to a UFC fight and you get three people and this guy gets one and you win. Oh, that's not cool. That's nothing to celebrate. And that is very real out there, that it's everything has a level, right? You got NASCAR, you got the ARCA series, all the way down to your local asphalt or dirt track, just the Friday, Saturday night wonder local shows, right? And there's a spot for everybody. And obviously in Demolition Derby, I would say full size V8 weldish cars is the premier competition, right? That's where the top level go to compete. Some people might say it's full size bone stock, but nonetheless, that's what we look at when we look at the premier classes of Demolition Derby. You're looking at some variation of full size V8, right?
Well, I would say there's a reason for that, right? And there's a reason why that is, because that takes the most skill in building, that takes the most skill in driving, that takes a little more money to compete in, right? Like there's a reason. It's not
Right.
just like, hey, it's the most entertaining. The motors, all that, is entertaining. There's a reason why that class has, kind of stood out above the others.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm not taking anything away from the other classes. Like I said, I started off driving trucks, and I didn't share this before, but I'll share it. The reason I stopped running trucks is because Adam looked at me one day in the shop and said, the only people that run trucks are the guys that can't hack it in cars. And that stuck, man. It burnt, because I used to really pride myself on running trucks. But then hearing that from Adam, I was like, well, I guess I got to run cars now. So I found my way into cars, and I'm glad I did, because it's a totally different world. I used to build some pretty crazy, nasty, hard trucks that you could hit anything, anywhere, and didn't have to worry about anything. It wasn't much skill, it was just point and shoot. And then when I started running cars, I really started learning about how important it is. If you look at a full-size V8 car, it doesn't matter if you're using the nose or you're using the ass end of the car. It's important what you hit and where you hit and how you hit, because up front, you got important stuff. You got a radiator, you got a fan, you got your engine, you got all your steering. Out back, you've got your rear end, you've got your rear suspension, you've got a fuel cell back there, you've got wheels. It matters, right? If you look at the other classes, the further away you get from full-size V8 cars, the less that stuff matters, right? You see these compacts out there, whether it's a Lumina or a Camry or whatever, all these front-wheel drive cars, the ass end can be completely shatapated where you're dragging it on the rear trailing arms, and it don't make a difference. The ass end of the car just does not matter. Absolutely destroy it, because there's nothing important back there. You don't need anything back there to steer. You don't need anything back there to go. You don't need anything back there to stop. Just destroy it, So that's, you have an advantage in a front wheel drive. The only thing you got to worry about is your nose.
I don't know if people have thought on that level. That's a new level for me, even. And I think I could be accused of people say, "Oh, you only talk about the King class." I just think that there's levels to it, right? And that's why we crown the king of different classes, because you are the baddest dude in the front wheel drive class. You are the baddest dude in the rear wheel drive class, but you're not the baddest dude at this show, because there's levels to it. And there's a pinnacle to this. This is a pyramid, and you should get in the front wheel drive. You should get in a stock front wheel drive or a Smith Metalworks rear wheel drive class, and then you should build yourself up, to that pinnacle. And I don't know if people have thought on that level. Like you talked about the build of the cars, it matters when you get to that level, because both ends of the car matter. You got to be able to drive it. Like you said, the compacts can just get their ass end completely beat off, and it doesn't matter. You don't get punished for that mistake. Well,
right.
at that next level, you do, and are we really thinking through that? Like, are we thinking about that when we're talking about the sport and building the sport, or are we highlighting, like you mentioned, minivans? Are we really, or is that really the pinnacle of our sport? That's what we're going to highlight? How well you can run a minivan? Like, I can't get behind that.
Yeah, it blows my mind the way that minivans in certain classes, when you bring up cherry picking, how that's worked in different, the chasing of points and the unified series and stuff. It's like, oh well, hey, at this show, they have a minivan class and it's 1,500 to win. That's the same price as the full size, so I might as well run a minivan. Well, a minivan is real similar to a compact, in my opinion. You beat the ass end off that thing. I mean, you could beat it all the way up to the back seats, and none of that matters back there, as long as the front is still holding together and pulling you across the track. That's all that matters. So it's, once again, you're at a different level of competition, and that minivan, all you're worried about is making sure you keep your nose clean. It's not the same as being in a full-size V8 car where your head's on a swivel. You're worried 360. You don't want to take a rear axle shot. You don't want to take a front wheel shot. You don't want to take a nose-to-nose shot. You don't want to get your doghouse cleaned off and it shifts your radiator. You don't want to take a nasty shot in the rear quarter and your ass end goes down. in anything else, whether, I ran trucks for a long time, and I drove with the nose, and the ass end was for defense. And I mean, you could do whatever you wanted to do to my bed, rip the damn thing clean off. Didn't matter. My frame rails weren't going to bend. The thing wasn't going to go down. I drove nose out all day. Everything was good. You go to front wheel drive stuff, mid-size stuff that's, that doesn't matter. It's a different caliber of driving. You're focused on one thing, just keeping your nose clean. And when you're making a shot with your nose, you're not worried about who's getting ready to drive up your ass, because you don't care about that. That's what it's for. It's just out there to be beaten. And that's one of the things that I think has gotten us away from that real level of competition. I think I could put my 8-year-old in a minivan and go out there and tell him, hey man, protect your nose. Just use the ass end of this, protect your nose. And I'm fairly confident he can hold his own out there against anybody else.
Well, because
he's got one thing to concentrate on.
It becomes a longevity game again. If you look at what Demolition Derby was for so long, it's just a longevity. I mean, there were times where me and my buddy Mitch, we would time derbies that we're going to go to, and we'd be like, all right, so all you got to do is have a motor that runs for 25 minutes and keep the tires on it, and you'll win the derby. Longevity. Right. We weren't talking about, when we were game planning for the derby, we weren't talking about who you got to actually beat. We were just talking, you just got to outlast them. So like there's room for all these classes in our sport, and they help generate this. They help build the sport. They help get people in the sport. It's hard to say that the same skill is involved in both of the builds, in both, and for that matter, a normal derby versus the format. I mean, we haven't even got into this, but Travis, I mean, if you go through these derbies, and I'm going to go through some of them, dude, there's a lot of times where people win these big shows where they actually never beat anybody. All they did was they were the best at avoiding contact that weekend. Really?
Right.
That's what we're doing. The guy didn't beat anyone. He didn't break anybody's steering. He didn't do anything. He just avoided contact the most. Here's your winner.
Right.
Is that really competition? I mean, a lot of these people are beating the drum of competition, but they'll put on a normal derby. There's no competition there.
Right. I mean, when you look at competition in any level of any sport, look at competition. Look at the NFL. Compare that competition down to middle school or high school football. Right. It's different. The higher you get, the more progressive it is, and it should be the same thing in our sport. The level of competition should be comparative, in my opinion, to any other sport, where it's not a matter of how many times did you avoid getting hit. It's how many hits did you make and keep moving. Look at gladiators in the Roman days. There was no way that you won by being on the defense, right? No. You could defend yourself the entire time. And if you never went to the offense to take that kill shot, you didn't win. You had to be on the offense. You had to be the aggressor. And granted, there is a line of being offensive, being defensive, being the aggressor, wait for it to come to you. That all plays into it, but it shouldn't be a matter of who was able to play defense for 2.5 hours, and then this guy, it comes down to Derby driver A versus Derby driver B. Derby driver B took out 25 cars. Now A comes over to him, and Derby driver B's hot. He's been working the engine all night. He's been doing all the work. A's fresh and comes over and taps him. His car dies, doesn't refire. Now Derby driver A wins. Did you really win? Or did you ride on the coattails of the person that did all the work, and then you took advantage of the situation knowing that you had been just cruising around all night, and if you could get his car to die, it wouldn't refire? I don't think that's winning. That comes back to a participation trophy. Just because you crossed the finish line, maybe you crossed the finish line, you were the first one to cross it, but were you the first one to cross it even though you had been lapped 4 times? How did it work? How did this work out? Because you didn't earn anything in that aspect is what I'm saying. If this guy took out half the field or a quarter of the field and his car was used and abused, then it came down to you with the fresh car because you were good at avoiding shit all night, or because you have a name that people fear, I don't want to mess with that guy, he's good. All you did was take advantage of a situation, and that's not winning in my book.
But yeah, that's the guy that we highlight. We highlight that guy. We don't even talk, they say make these shirts, sandbaggers cash checks. We're like,
right.
we're rewarding guys for not competing. And I keep saying this because people like say, hey, I don't like the format. I don't like the format. I'm like, yeah, but look what you're rewarding on the other side. You don't like sandbagging either. Competition, man, that's where it's at. Put it in the driver's hands. Put it in their hands. Let's have real competition. Let's not beat the drum of competition and be like, I want competition more than anybody out there. Get on the old high horse. I want competition more than anybody out there, but I'm going to sit on the wall and I'm going to dictate who hits who. What do you mean you're going to like my biggest freaking pet peeve is, Travis, you get me against the wall, you're beating the hell out of me. What's the first thing an official does?
Tells me to stop.
What? Tells you just worked and got me in a compromised position, and now you have to what? Stop beating on me? What the hell are we doing? You should beat me until I either break my stick or I should go on the clock because I'm not making contact at a minute, I lose. You shouldn't have to stop hitting me. What's going on?
I compared this to the UFC before in a driver's meeting when I was told by the tech crew, the promoters, if you get somebody against the wall, don't hit them again. Don't push them into the wall. If they get up against the wall, back off. And I said, how much sense does that make? That'd be like saying, hey, this is the UFC. If you knock them down, let them stand back up.
Yeah,
so I worked as hard as I could to get this person to the ground so that I could then mount them and pummel them. But you're telling me I can't do that. I got to let them back up. So I worked to get this guy against the wall. And now I have him in a compromised position where I can really beat the brakes off of this damn car. And you're going to tell me that I can't do that? I can't take advantage of the situation that I created for myself? Oh gosh, that is so frustrating. And let's be real. When that situation does occur, right? And there's Derby driver B is up against the wall and Derby driver A is giving it to him and they don't wave Derby driver A off. But 10 minutes ago, when B had C against the wall, they were waving B off. Or they do wave Derby driver A, B, and C off, but only Derby driver A listened, B and C didn't listen, and they don't do anything about that. There's no unity in that. There's no way that they actually enforce it. So why have that be a rule? Let me run my Derby.
It's crazy. People just don't think about these things. And when you sit down and think about them, like, what are you doing? Like competition, man. Competition means competition. Competition means you're going to win some and you're going to lose some. It means that, dude, it doesn't feel good to lose, but that's what should make you better. And
well, that's what should make you hungry.
But that's not what we're teaching. We're not even teaching our youth that. We're not teaching anybody that. I mean, we're just repeating the same habits over and over and over again. Scotty Drevedek Jr., okay, is a perfect example. Scotty is literally known for not hitting anyone at all. Like, he just won't hit anyone. I'm going to tell you what, hats off to that guy because he came to our show, ran our format, and won the show. Okay, I'm back. So,
alrighty.
Sorry about that. So Scotty Drevedek Jr., he comes and he wins our show and takes calculated, skilled shots and beats, the youth competition. And I mean, he's coming back because he's coming back in a full-size car. And I haven't heard this from him directly, but if you think a 16-year-old kid is going to come back and give it a shot, I got to think he had a little fun doing that. He felt like, man, this was a challenge. This wasn't just outlasting my competition. This meant something. And if we're not doing that and we're not teaching these youngsters, this is how you drive, this is how you take out cars, and we're not putting them in those situations, what are we doing? Seriously, what are we doing?
Right. It has to be created, right? There's another situation with many aspects to it and a large dynamic, in that situation that you created last year, it creates, in my opinion, a level of confidence and surety, if you will. Like, so I'm out there on the track. It's heat one. There's two other people on the track with me. I got to beat them. I'm confident in my car. I'm confident in my driving. And I know that all I got to do is beat these two people. And then I get time to fix my car before I run again. I don't have to worry about beating these two people and then this group of 5 coming over and ganging up on me. I don't have to worry about beating these two people and then going against the guy that sat against the wall and watched me beat these two people. Right?
Amen.
So that brings a whole nother level of confidence to it, to know that this is my objective. This is what I have to achieve, and I can see it, right? At any time, you can put your eyes on those two cars. You know what you're up against. There's no secrets. There's not someone hiding in the corner. There's not 3 people that are just rubbing paint down here that once you beat those 2 people, these 3 guys are going to come jump you. And that's been bred into our derby world, where a lot of shows have turned into that is, can you keep your nose clean long enough to capitalize at the last minute to win? And it's sad. It's really sad, honestly, because that's not what derby is about. It's no sport is about that, right? You don't see NFL players going, you know what, we're going to lose every game till we get to the Super Bowl. Then we're going to win that one.
Yeah, we're gonna rest our players. We're gonna rest our players until we get to. Well, you don't get to the Super Bowl unless you earn it. There's,
right, and
there's nothing earned here.
At NASCAR, you don't see, nobody goes, you know what, I'm going to lose every race except for Talladega, or I'm going to lose every race except for the Daytona, or I'm going to lose every race except for Bristol. They want to win every race that they get on the track, and they don't go, you know what, to win this race, I'm going to hang out in last place, and then I'm going to try and take advantage of the situation on the last pit stop. I'm going to hope for a caution and maybe I can make up a couple places on the restart or something. That usually isn't their strategy. It's usually, hey, I want to get out front and I want to stay out front. That's it. We win with our offense.
Well, and NASCAR's even changed their format to reward people even more with the stage points and all of that. Like, why? Well, because you want to reward talent. You want to reward skill. If you lead a halfway through the race or a third of the way through the race, you get points. You get extra points. No different than our heats.
It's all the motorsports we look at. I mean, you look at motocross. Those guys. I mean, that's the best athlete out there, in my opinion. And they, their goal is off that gate. Let's pull the whole shot. Let's get one and let's stay there. None of them go, you know what? I'm going to hang back in 6th place, save a little bit of energy, and the last 3 laps, I'm going to explode and see if I can get out front. They don't do that. But that dynamic has been created in our sport to where it's a marathon instead of a sprint. Well, you know what? I'm going to go over here. I'm going to scrape some paint. I'm going to grab first and reverse, back and forth for the first hour. And then, in the last 5 minutes of the Derby, when it comes down to me and one other person, I'm going to turn it up a little bit and you'll be able to hear my car come off idle. That's just terrible. It's boring. Fans don't like it. I don't know how the drivers do it. Maybe that says something about me. Maybe I'm not a good driver, because there is no way that I could be on the track for 3 hours just going back and forth. Couldn't do it. I'd be bored.
I think you could make the argument that those sports, the reason why they don't have that, everything that you're talking about, is because they're not rewarding it. What we are literally rewarding the most, with the biggest check and the most fame and all this stuff, is the guy that does that. And that's where I'm like, I scratch my head when people can't wrap their head around the format. And I'm always like, there's a hidden agenda here why you don't want to run the format, because there's no way you can't see that it's just pure competition, and that we don't want to reward the people that have the biggest team, or reward the people that avoid the most contact. Like, nobody does that. You can't do that. You can't reward people that, it requires little to no skill to be, well, I don't want to say little to no skill. I mean, it's skillful to avoid contact. But that's not true competition. Like, you want to reward the guy that is the baddest dude out there. And when we talk about driving, do we talk about that, Trace Braun is undefeated in the format? Like, he has been beat. Do we talk about Pete Hanson and how he basically, manhandled his heat last year? Like, Pete Hanson just destroyed his heat. Now, look, that doesn't mean that those other two drivers are terrible drivers or anything like that. That just means that Pete Hanson was better that night, because those other two drivers, they could get him the next night. But, we haven't highlighted that throughout our sport. Like, that's what we want to highlight.
Yeah, that you just brought a new light to me. It's basically like we are. It'd be like the X Games having a big air competition and giving the trophy to the person that jumped the shortest distance.
Yeah.
That's what we've created. Honestly, that's what we have, because you hear so much. And I mean, I've even become accustomed to it. Hey man, let that guy drive. Or you hear the saying of, well, he's driving to win. He's driving to win. Every other motorsport, when you say driving to win, that doesn't mean you're taking it easy. I don't care if it's NASCAR, if it's motocross, if it's drifting, if it's rally sport, if it's the, desert runs, in any other motorsport there is. When you're driving to win, that means you're focused, you're dialed in, and you're driving hard. You're giving it everything. You're using everything the car has. You're using everything the bike has, everything. Whatever, you look at rally car racing, you're like, oh man, that guy's on. That meant that he was out there running that car at red line on that, flirting with the edge of disaster, just right there on that fine line of being in control and out of control. And he was able to keep it together long enough to get the win. But for some reason, the culture created in Demolition Derby, driving to win meant that guy used his car as little as possible. He avoided the most hits, and he outlasted everybody else that was really pushing the limits of their equipment while he wasn't pushing the limits of his. Why did we start rewarding that, and why have we continued? That's the downfall. And I never really looked at it that way.
It's crazy. It's asinine to me. And I think these conversations will shed some light on that. I mean, it's no different than, the point series. I mean, you get points to show up. Like, what about getting points to beat cars? I mean, that's right. I don't know. That's highlight competition, guys. Let's highlight that.
Right. I agree. And I've had a conversation with Mark Elliott. I've talked to you, talked to plenty of people. This is a situation where I think we need to create a standard, a format, if you will, where there is top tier competition. And then you have your lower tiers. And if you're not interested in competing at the top tier, the top level of competition, where it's actually about competition, it's actually about how well you build and how well you drive, and it's got to be the total package, then you drop down a tier, then you stay in minivans, or you stay at the county fair, whatever it looks like for you. But I think want to be at the top level of competition and compete with like-minded individuals, then you conform to what that looks like and you strive to achieve that greatness, not settle for what we currently have and rewarding the guy that lasted the longest.
I agree, man. I've had conversations with Pete Hanson, and I'm like, Pete, if the format existed for the last 20 years, Pete Hanson would have a record of something like this, 159-10. You know,
Right.
that's because that dude's a bad dude. You know what I'm saying? And
oh man, Pete's a builder. He's a hell of a builder. He's a hell of a driver. He's a stand-up dude. I mean, he's always got a badass looking ride, and he gets after it, man. He gets down. He's one of those people that, I mean, from what I've seen, I don't care if it's his best friend on the track. When it's time to go, if it's him versus best friend, it's time to go, and that's how it should be, in my opinion. You know, we ran a local show, a county fair. It was me, Adam Williams, Kerry Gerke, Bobby Brockway, and it was our local fair. All of our family there and whatever, and we all talked amongst ourselves, and we're like, hey, we're here to win. I want the bragging rights. You know, I don't care if anybody else shows up. If it's just us four, it's just us four. Tighten your fucking chin strap. I'm coming for you. And that's what we did, you know, and there was no hard feelings. We weren't mad at each other. There, you know, it's actually funny, you know, it came down to me and Kerry Gerke, and I got stuck. Kerry just made one light tap on me and backed up. Now, don't get me wrong, I was hot, like angry, because here I am stuck, and he just tapped me and he backed up and he let me sit there, right? He took the win. And at first I was angry, and then, you know, naturally I turned it around to, well, obviously he didn't want to get me unstuck because he knew he couldn't beat me if I was mobile.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Which, whether that's the case or not, I don't know, but there was no hard feelings, you know. We shook hands, we hugged, that was awesome. And that's what it should be. And I think there's too many people that are afraid of burning a bridge or ruining a relationship on the track because you're doing what you're supposed to be doing on that track.
Well, I think I think you're right about that. I think I wanted to touch on something with Pete and some other guys and yourself, because this hasn't existed in the sport. I'm surprised we haven't lost more people. You know, Pete, Trace, and those guys, they're so hungry for this competition. That's why they're not going to shy away from it. They're coming full throttle. They don't give a shit who's in front of them. But you had guys like yourself, Logan Duvall, Blake Neely, that have got in and out of the sport multiple times. And the reason why is because the sport isn't fulfilling their need for, or your need for, competition, for true competition. So they go find it other places. You know, they find it in drag racing. It's not like they don't give, you know, a trophy to the guy that's the slowest down the line. They give it to the guy that is the fastest. You know, it's a
Right.
quarter mile, it's an eighth mile, whatever it is.
And they reward innovation.
You know, we've done ourselves a disservice because how many other guys have we lost in the sport? You know, you hear this comment all the time. Oh, it's not fun anymore. It's not fun anymore. Like, how many people have we lost, like yourself, that maybe there's 5 guys out there that they're out of it and they're not coming back. You know, you're willing to come back. Is Logan willing to come back, like, and give this a shot? Or is he going to wait another year or two to see how this all pans out? Like, we can't afford to lose guys like yourself, you know, because we're not fulfilling the competition aspect of this.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. And Logan is funny you mentioned him. You know, Logan and Adam are pretty close. I'm pretty close with Logan. Actually, the last mod car I was running for a while was one of Logan's old mod cars. And he, you know, the last show he ran was Bash for Cash. And naturally, Adam and I have talked to him, tried getting him to come run at the King. He's kind of on the fence about it. You know, he was looking in to see he'd be able to run his leftover bash car there, what he would have to cut and so on. I don't know that he's made a final decision. I know that he's having a blast drag racing because it is fueling his desire and his need for competition, and there's rewarded. He like you said, he gets rewarded for being the fastest guy, not for avoiding the most races. You don't get a trophy if you got to buy for 3 rounds, and that's what we're rewarding. Like, oh, hey man, you avoided 20 cars hitting you, here's a trophy.
Yeah.
And you're right, I have heard a lot of people saying it's not fun anymore. It's not what it used to be. I've dealt with local promoters. I've heard, I got a buddy that I swear he's the luckiest derby driver there is, man. I mean, he builds all of his own stuff, builds his own engines, he builds his cars, he does everything. His name's Nick Wright. He's a hell of a driver. Kid he's got a lucky rabbit's foot up his ass or something, I swear. But I've literally heard promoters tell him, hey, you've won too many times with that truck, don't bring it back to our show. Well, why not? It's built to the rules. I outdrove everybody. Well, we know you did something to it. And he's like, no, I didn't. If I did, what did I do? You guys inspected it and put the stick on it. Don't bring it back. Hey, don't bring that car back here anymore. Hey, we want you to run something different. They literally kill the competition. They blame him for it. They say, hey, Nick, you've won this so many times, so many years in a row. People are starting to not want to come. How much sense does that make? Is that the culture of our world now, that, oh, this guy's won so many times, we'll just let him win? That's all of it works in together. When you hear people go, oh man, if I'm running out there and I'm on the track, with Pete or with Trace or with Adam or whoever, like, I don't stand a chance. Like, what? I mean, I'm telling you right now, I pull a heat draw and it's me, someone I don't know, and Pete Hanson. I promise you, I respect Pete enough that I'm going after him right off the bat, because I know he is my competition. I know who he is. I know how he builds. I know how he drives. I know he's my competition. So that's my number one. That's my tunnel vision right there is Pete. We have so many other people that have this, like, oh man, I'm going to go after Travis because I don't know who he is. And I know Pete's a bad motherfucker. Well, then, you don't want to go with him at the end, right? Take him out now. But we have so many people that would rather avoid that competition and just hang out there in the shadows and, accept mediocrity. And we need to get out of that rut. And I think it starts here with this of, you don't have a choice because there's nowhere to hide and there's a huge prize at the end. If you're running for 10 grand and, third place is 2,500, what's the big deal? You went out there and you didn't piss off the guy that won first place. You took third, you got a check, cool. But if you're running for $50,000, that's a hell of a lot of motivation to not give a shit what anybody else on the track thinks.
Well, and I hope no matter what happens, this year, whether we get to 100 cars or it's 75 or whatever it is, that, this part of the conversation I'm going to have with that group of drivers that show up that weekend is we're building towards something, whether it is the 50,000 or it pays 37,500 or 40,000 or whatever it is. Know that because you guys showed up today, and helped the event and promoted the event, we're building towards something. And, look in the mirror, don't hang your head low, no matter what happens in the competition realm of this thing, because there was guys that weren't even willing to show up. You already beat those guys because you're in their head or we're in their head or something. You already beat those guys. You've already beat half the competition out there. You're here, whatever happens, let it all hang out and may it shake out how it shakes out. That's very important. That message is extremely important to resonate in the Derby world, to build on something, man. And you guys are freaking the start of it, or 2 years ago it was the start of it, but we just keep growing. We're gonna have more cars there this year than we had last year, and we had more cars last year than we had the first year. So it's growing. People are getting it. Are they
And
getting
I
it?
think
Go ahead.
I think you're engaging people, like you said, to go back on people that have left. I mean, I was somebody that left because I wasn't fulfilled. Adam took a 3 or 4 year break from Demolition Derby because he wasn't fulfilled. Kerry Gerke sold out. The guy Nick I was just talking about literally just texted me the other day and was like, "Yeah, I might put something together this year. I don't know. It's getting kind of stale, you know." And those are the people that I challenge to go, "Hey, hold on. Here's something new. Here's something exciting. And this isn't stale. And this is, in my opinion, what everybody should be chasing." So your reach is working, right? It reached Adam. It reached me. It reached my local guy, Mitch Ward. It reached Tyler Barra. It's reaching people. And there's a hell of an argument. And I have yet to speak with someone or talk to them on Facebook or whatever, where somebody could give me a logical explanation of what is wrong with the format or how it's rigged or how it does not work. I've yet to see that.
I'm yet to hear that. I really am. I mean, if you look at that, let's break that down. I mean, if you look at the problems with Demolition Derby, we have a teaming problem, we have a sandbagging problem, we have a subjective decisions problem, and we have a competition problem. Okay. If you look at those, the format is designed to limit or get rid of each one of those problems. You talk about the teaming problem. Well, I know it's not every man for themselves, but it's 2-on-1, the max. Okay. And only one moves on. All right. So that is very, very limited. Talk about the sandbagging problem. Well, look, no longer is it a contest of longevity. As soon as you can beat two cars, whether that takes you 30 seconds or 30 minutes, okay, you're moving on. There is no, I gotta deal with his buddies after this. Let's talk about the subjective decision making by officials. Look, we put everything in your hands on the track. That's our job. Our job is to create the stage for you and be as hands off as we can be, to the point of, we implement that if you get rolled over and we have to help any car in any way, you're out, you're done. We don't help cars off the wall. We don't help guys. We don't stop the Derby to put a tire back on. If we have to roll you over, you're done. That's it. Your night's over. Sorry, you had a short night. We get rid of all subjective decisions, because I challenge people to look at derbies in which somebody got rolled over and then they roll them back over and let them compete. It changes the entire derby. But for me as a competitor, I say, I've already beat that guy. He couldn't continue on his lid, could he? Like, he can't continue. The only reason why he rolled him back over is because of safety. I beat him. We stay out of the wall stuff. We don't tell people like, hey, you can't hit this guy because he's on the wall. No, beat the hell out of him. He's the one, you're the one that put him there, or he put himself there. Right. And then, the fourth thing is what did I not cover yet? Competition, subjective decisions. Right. Yeah. And then competition. Dude, besides a team show, if you think about it, like, there's no show on the planet that actually makes you beat cars. I know for a fact that when whoever wins the King of Ohio or in the King class or the King of Ohio or the other events, you're going to have to beat 2 to 4 people. In the King class, you're going to have to beat 4 people, and there's not going to be any debate. You had to beat 4 people.
Minimum. I mean, that's if you go through the winner side. If you end up making it to the feature through the losers bracket, you had to beat more. I'm with you.
You had to beat people. I name a derby out there that you actually have to beat people. That's not a team show. There isn't one. There's not one derby out there that makes you beat people. It's kind of crazy that we haven't centered our whole entire sport. And maybe this is the growth that we need. Maybe this is the transition from hobby to sport, is you highlight different things. The hobby is you highlight the the big hits, the cars bending, the cars folding, then the sport is you highlight the talent that's on display, of beating cars. Maybe that's the transition, right?
Makes sense.
And that's what we got to get more and more people to understand is, and we got to do a better job. I got to do more of these podcasts, educating people. I got to have more conversations with drivers. I've got to, have announcers that are on top of it and educating our crowd. We've got to do all that because I really think that this is purely just an educational difference.
I hope so. I'd hate to think that Demolition Derby has already peaked and is now on the decline. I like to think that we haven't peaked yet and we're on our way there.
Yeah, I mean, hell, we haven't become a sport yet, so it has to be on the incline, right? If we head the right direction, and you just ask that, yeah, you guys support us. I mean, look, we're not going to make every right call. We're not, our tech's not going to be perfect. There's going to be things about our show that maybe you don't like, but dude, we are going to do our best to get everything right that we possibly can. And that's all I can that's all I can tell you. You know what I'm saying? That's all I can promise you. And by the way, we're going to pay the most money of anybody too. And hopefully that when you go home, when you win this show, that you can go home to the wife, because you spend so many countless hours away from your wife and your family, that you can go home with, say, hey, let's go on an awesome vacation. Let's do an upgrade to the house, because that's the money that we're talking about here. I mean, 50,000 is nothing to shake a stick at.
Yeah, maybe build a new shop to build another car in.
Exactly. Whatever you want to do. I mean, right? Like and I don't know if people have fully grasped that yet. Like, dude, that's kind of life-changing to win 50,000.
Whoever, I mean, if we get to that 100 car mark, which I'm confident we will, and I say we as a Derby community, as a driver that is helping to push for this, because I want that level of competition. And we're competing for that $50,000. I mean, that's life-changing money to people. There's people that have won $50,000 in a lottery and they do a news special on them. They do a write-up on them in the newspaper, because that's life-changing money for some people.
Mm-hmm.
And last year was 25, this year is 50. Let's hope next year is at least 50, if not more, and it sells out faster. And I mean, let's go to, we're looking at, we got to show this month and we got to show this month, because we had so many entries for the first show, and the fan base is there to support it. The spectators are there, the event sponsors are there, the parts sponsors are there. Like, that's where I want to see this go. And I'm opening myself up to anybody that listens to this or sees it, hears it, comes across it in any way, shape, or form. Any way that you would like to reach out to me, whether it's Facebook or, I mean, when this thing gets posted, put my phone number in it. I don't care, TikTok, whatever. If there's anything I can do to answer anybody's question about a build, or what car to run, or what parts do you use, or how do you do this, reach out to me. I mean, I'm a pretty easy guy to talk to, and I'll send you pictures. I'll video chat with you. I'll do whatever I can to help support the community that wants to support this growth.
Well, Travis, I think this has been an excellent podcast. I think that's a great note to end on. I appreciate you coming on, and I appreciate you not only coming on, but showcasing your build and being vocal about who you're supporting and why you're supporting them, and doing what you can to help grow the sport. So thank you very much for that.
Hey, man, you're welcome. And I appreciate the opportunities that you have provided by creating the format and trying to push this show and creating the dance floor, if you will, for us all to take a spin on.
Well, we're all in it together, man. We only hope that the dance floor gets bigger and
amen,
and brighter, right? So, all right, man, that wraps up episode 10. Thank you again, Travis, and hope you guys enjoyed it. Make sure you like, follow our pages, and subscribe on YouTube. Thank you all.